Hello again, friends, and you are my friends. And welcome to another edition of 605, the Superpodcast, the only podcast on Turner Time. I'm doing an intro, actually, because I'm not sure how we're going to do this. It's time for our annual trivia contest, and I can't decide if it's going to be its own special or if we will include it in a regular edition of 605, but we will find out. Here's our first contestant, Howard Baum. Howard, welcome to the show.
Hey.
Are you a sissy?
Oh, come on now, Terry.
Let's spend the night together.
You know what that is, right?
It's my boy Kevin.
Let's spend the night together.
I was on an audition for the Rolling Stones. I have to return to that project of trying to get him the same Rolling Stones songs, and then I gotta have them there. But here we are, Howard. We're gonna do the annual trivia contest, and we have some really cool prizes. I want to first thank our friends at ECW Press. We have a couple copies of Death of the Territories, the brand new book by Tim Hornbaker. We talked about it on the show. Tim was on the show. Great segment, got a big reaction. It is a fantastic book. I think, if anything, the only problem is we're gonna do a giveaway for the book. And seemingly everyone has bought the book and read the book because of the attention it's got, and everyone loves the book. So we'll see who actually doesn't have the book that competes today. But we also do have some other prizes here in the 605 war chest that we could potentially dish out to people. Plus, you have a chance to win a date with Howard Baum. What's better than that?
And if I can't go, I'm going to send Big Titty Moolah in my place.
What did you think of that when you heard that, when you listened back?
Man, I was cracking up 5 seconds into the show. I'm like, not only are they referencing my children, but actually improving upon them. So I thought that was tremendous. I was LOLing in public, walking around Hollywood, Florida. Big Titty Moolah.
Just hearing Bick say the word titty.
Just to hear Bick say that is worth the price of admission alone.
Well, let's get our first contestant here. This is going to be a bit of a train wreck, I think, because we don't have that many questions, so we're going to kind of do it on the fly. I also have Tim's book here, so I'll get some questions out of there. Usually we do show trivia. We're doing 1980s trivia, although we may mix in some random questions here and there. But let's get our first contestant, and I'm going to try to add this person now. Hold on. Let me add the dial pad. We will dial this person in.
Hello?
Look out!
Rob McCabe.
For a moment there, I thought I was being haunted by the ghost of Lance Russell.
I don't want to see you around here anymore.
Well, maybe you are. You never know, but Rob McCabe, you are the first contestant this year, our annual trivia contest. I think I always tend to do it more than once a year, and it ends up being once a year. But welcome to the show. Howard Baum, popular co-host, is also on the line. Say hello to everyone.
Hi, Howard.
Hey, how are you,
you're
man?
talking to Howard.
I was talking to you, but...
Pretty good.
All right.
Well, you did say everyone.
I did say everyone.
I could see where it'd be confusing, but how are you, Rob?
Good. How's it going?
So, Rob, you have a distinct honor in that you were previously a contestant for trivia, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And how did that go?
Not very well. More Santino than Barry Horowitz.
Well, I guess that's, I never heard that expression before. I guess that's a bad thing. Do you remember what question you bombed out on?
Yeah, it was the Slip House Boys.
The Slip House Boys. What a horrible thing to bomb out on. But this time we're doing it a little different. I'm going to ask you some 1980s questions. And of course, you put on Facebook.com/Superpodcast that your favorite angle of the 80s is everything with Hogan and Savage. Briefly, let the listeners know why that's your favorite angle of the 80s.
Well, first of all, first time that I remember seeing Randy Savage was when Apophos came up to the Maritimes. So I sort of have this fondness for Lanny and Randy Savage, obviously. And secondly, the Hogan, being a child of the 80s, lots of kids from the 80s say that they didn't like Hogan. I call bullshit on that. It's like making fun of the kid in the 60s with the monkey's lunchbox,
Yeah, if you were a kid in the 80s.
Yeah, sure, you trashed him.
Hogan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And just the chemistry that those two guys had together it was just incredible. And the actual storytelling itself, like the way that they started it and the way they teased it out and gave you little hints that Savage was going to do the heel turn, was just, it's everything that I think a modern WWE writer wishes that they could come up with, but but
Well,
they
hold on 1 second, Rob. Now, you said Savage did the heel turn. Let me ask you something. How would you feel if you and your girl are hanging out, you start hanging out with this other guy, and next thing you know, he's rubbing up on your girl, he's picking her up on his shoulders, he's always hugging her,
that was
trying to
coming.
be close to her. You say Randy Savage turned heel. I don't know. Maybe Randy Savage was completely justified in his feelings, but what do you think?
Well, in terms of how they laid out the story, I love how they edited each of their individual promos, so that if you watched Savage doing the promo and they showed you all of the stuff from his point of view, you would come away thinking that he was the baby face and Hogan was the heel. But then you turn around and you watch Hogan's promos and how that was edited and all of the events from Hogan's standpoint, you would probably think that, oh my God, this Randy Savage guy he's a freaking lunatic. He's a freaking jealous asshole, you know.
But again, some big oiled up guy keeps getting close to my girl and doing everything. He's lifting her up and everything. Would you do that if you were hanging out with one of your friends and his girl's there in a bikini bottom? Would you just be like, hey, let me lift you up and put you on my shoulders while your man's over here doing something else?
I wouldn't, but then again, I'm not Hulk Hogan.
Well, that's true. That's true.
There's a lot of things that I wouldn't do, but then again, I'm not Hulk Hogan or Terry Bollea.
Well, that's right. You have to make sure there's a difference because as we learned during his trial, Terry Bollea's penis is normal size. There is a difference. And Hulk Hogan, based on sworn testimony, has a much larger penis that he talks about to the world. A fascinating thing. But let's get you some questions here. You have to answer 3 questions to win a copy of Death of the Territories. You don't already have a copy, do you?
I do not, no.
Okay, good. If you would have said yes, I don't know what I would have done. But we would have moved on, as we are now. Here are 3 questions. You have to answer 3 to win the book. If you don't win the book, it's just 2 years in a row. You'll get another shot next year. You're now going to be our resident guy until you get one right.
Okay.
Question 1. This will be an easy one. Who did Hulk Hogan wrestle at Shea Stadium?
In 1980, Andre the Giant.
That is correct. Andre the Giant in 1980. Question 2. Name 3 territories Billy Jack Haynes walked out on.
3 territories
Obviously
Billy
in the
Jack
1980s. Just to clarify, in the 1980s.
Right. World Class Championship Wrestling.
Correct.
The WWF the first time.
Correct.
And, Portland?
Yes, correct. You win, well, you don't win anything yet, actually. You got 2 right. But you're on the way. You have one last question here. So, Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan. Let me see if I can get you one last good question. This has to be a little tougher, obviously, because of the nature of the show and this book being a hot commodity that everyone seems to own already. Who won Southwest Championship Wrestling's World Title Tournament in 1983 at the Summit in Houston, Texas?
Oh, that's a giveaway.
Ooh.
You think that's a giveaway, Howard?
Adrian Adonis.
Adrian Adonis, that is
there you go.
Correct. You win a copy of Death of the Territories, our first contestant, our first winner. This may be a quick episode of the Super Podcast, but Rob, congratulations. You know how it works. Message me the way you have been at the show page and send me your address, and I will get you a copy of this book. Are you looking forward to reading this book?
Yeah, I am. I've read his previous 2 books, the history of the NWA and I guess you want to call it the McMahon history. Yeah, Capital. Yeah. Yeah. No,
this one I think you will really like. This one is definitely Tim's best book, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And it's
awesome.
filled with so much information. But as always, I appreciate you supporting the show. I appreciate you participating today and putting up with our unprofessionalness here on the Super Podcast. But message me your address and congratulations on winning. And thanks for listening to the show, Rob.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian. Horowitz wins. All right.
All right. But at least Santino doesn't win this year. That's right.
Exactly.
All right, Rob. Take care, man. Have a good weekend.
So long.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Howard. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And I believe he has left the call. I actually don't know how to just disconnect him. Bix told me, and then I messed it up. Well, I didn't expect him to win it on the first one, Howard. Maybe these questions are too fucking easy.
That was pretty impressive.
Or
I mean, I don't know if I could have gotten the second one, although I was going to say, well, I'm sure he walked out in his hometown, Portland, numerous times, so that's kind of, but I didn't even really realize he walked out on World Class, so that was pretty good.
He ran opposition to Portland, directly against Don Owen. World Class, so I'm trying to remember the order of things. He went from Portland, I want to say, did he go to Florida first? Portland.
He was in Florida in 84. I know that.
It was 84. Okay.
And I think WWF in 85.
No, WWF was 84. He was in and out in 84. Before you had a real chance to invest in him, but after they had a chance to not get their merchandising going, because he was already on the magazine cover and everything else. And then he was in World Class. He walked out of there. He was back in Portland here and there. He was in Florida. What happened to him in Florida?
I don't know, because, like in a flashback to the last episode, I left Florida before he did. So, like, when I left Florida for college, he was still working on top against, who was he working in? Kendo Nagasaki. He had a big feud with Kendo Nagasaki in 84.
And then, of course, he walked out of the NWA as they were about to build him up and I believe give him the TV title. So that's another place he walked out of. Billy Jack Haynes, one of those guys you see on those early 80s magazine covers and you go, everything will go wrong for his career. But let's get another contestant here. I'm going to need help with some hard questions. I'm going to actually pick up Tim's book here, and I'm going to pick up some. I'm going to pick some questions out of here. Not that there are questions in here, but I will develop the questions based on what I see. Let's add someone. Caller 2. All right, we are dialing our next contestant now.
Matthew speaking.
Yo. What's up?
All right.
Matt Mann.
That's me.
Welcome to the Superpodcast. Welcome to our annual trivia contest. Say hello to Howard Baum.
Hi, Howard.
How are you, sir?
I'm good.
Must be a big day for you.
It's a big day for him. Matt's a longtime listener, and he's been a good friend of the show, and now he's going to have a chance to win a copy of Death of the Territories. I got to ask you first, do you have a copy already?
I do not.
Okay, you're one of the few people. There's 2 people in a row who have not had copies of this book. What's going on before we get to questions? You are one of the people I count on whenever there's a Mike Lano incident in California. You're one of the first people that gets in touch and lets me know what's happened.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Howard, you can stay out of this part of the show if you want.
Right, Mike's my boy. I don't want to participate in any of this besmirchment. It is entertaining, though.
He's earned every bit that he has received and will receive, and then some.
What did he do to you?
He blocks the view of the ring with his large ass.
If I was paying for a ticket, that would bother me, yes.
Especially if you're sitting in the front row paying $40 for a front row ticket. So
that would bother me if I'm paying a front row ticket and Lano's in front of me the whole time. That would bother me too. But here you're from Northern California, but you picked your favorite angle of the 1980s as being, and actually I wrote this on the wrong thing, Eddie Gilbert and the Russians putting the flag on Bill Watts, the famous, they're putting the flag on the Cowboy incident from the UWF in 1986.
Yes, sir.
Why that?
It was just at that time the whole Cold War, and Cowboy being the ultra baby, and it's just pro wrestling. It's pro wrestling. My second favorite angle would be the Ted DiBiase babyface tournament at South TV, where he got dropped on his head. Yeah,
November '85, one of the greatest angles of the '80s, maybe of all time, and even a great match.
The best 1 hour TV program ever.
Certainly, I think that is true. And I know someone will say, oh, the New Japan show where they had the 3 great matches. But in terms of angles, interviews, emotion, and match quality, and your phone ringing, I would definitely go with that 1 hour show as well. Who is that?
I'm at work.
Oh, well, who is that? Well, there you go. We'll get rid of your phone call there. But what do you think of the angle they did before that? The one where Bill Watts started beating up the Blade Runners in the ring and punching Korchenko. It was kind of like the baby faces acted like heels, but they got away with it because they were beating up Russians and steroid abusers.
It was too much. It made Bill Watts look too strong, and, that's, when you're the boss and that ego.
Well, who do you think looked better in their comeback, Fritz Von Erich or Bill Watts?
Oh, it was Bill Watts. Bill Watts. Fritz has always been a decrepit old man, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. Well,
so I've always seen him as old.
All right. Well, I don't know what happened with you and Fritz, but we'll find out. But let's get some questions here, Matt. Just so you know, you're our second contestant. Our first one swept through and won the book. So maybe my questions are too easy. And I know you know your stuff, so this may be too easy.
Mm-hmm.
Question 1. Name every NWA champion in order from Kerry Von Erich to Ricky Steamboat.
Oh, my goodness.
Holy shit. From Kerry. Okay, that means there was no Malaysia.
I thought you were going to say from the beginning of time.
Oh, man.
By the way, I'm not going to count any phantom switches or any switches that were done on the fly in Australia, New Zealand, or anywhere else, if that's one of your computers.
All right, let's
and also,
go.
if you're at work, stay away from your work computer.
Oh, yeah, I'm outside.
Okay.
Kerry, Flair, Harley. No. Hold on, let's go. Kerry, Flair, Dusty, Flair, Ronnie Garvin, Flair, Steamboat.
Good job. That's question 1.
No, I missed it.
Wow.
I missed it.
What do you mean you missed it?
Sting is in there, too.
No, Sting was after. Sting was in 1990.
Oh, well, there you go. I got it then.
That's impressive.
Flair regains the title from Ricky Steamboat, and then he eventually loses it to Sting at Great American Bash 1990. Howard, would you have been able to do that?
I would not even. I only started following the NWA when Howard Brody took it over, so I don't even know anything that happened previous to that.
Ring Warriors.
Well, come on.
Don't-
They could use that promotion, but let's not give it to them right now. But our next question here, question 2 for you. Who did Leon White pin in his debut in the Vader gimmick?
Antonio Inoki.
Antonio Inoki. Famous night? A riot?
Oof.
Okay, I need a good third question. This is getting too easy. Howard, what do I do here?
He's on fire. I didn't know those previous two.
Can't ask him this, he'll know it. I can't ask you ones I know you're going to know.
Think of an LA-based one, but really obscure.
He's from San Francisco.
I'm up north.
Yeah. Really obscure LA. What year did Lano start shooting ringside? What year does Mike Lano claim he started shooting ringside?
I have no idea.
1966. I'm not going to count that against you. I said that to John Arezzi the other night. John Arezzi almost fell out of his chair. We're at the Met game, and we're talking, and Lano came up, as he naturally does. And I said, he says he's been shooting ringside at the Olympic Auditorium since 1966. And Arezzi said since he was 10 years old, he was shooting ringside at the Olympic Auditorium? Watch anything from the Olympic Auditorium. There's a row of chairs. You don't see little 10-year-old Mike Lano running around. Let's see. Third question. I can't ask you this. You'll know this.
San Fran.
Doesn't have to be about San Fran. It has to be about the 80s.
It would be nice, though. It would be nice.
It would be nice.
A really obscure San Fran, Northern Cal.
This is the wrong guy to try to hit with the San Francisco question, I think.
Right. But that's why you're going to make it super tough. But I really don't know enough about that territory, so,
Matt, what would you say is your area of expertise for 1980s wrestling?
86, 87 Crockett.
86, 87 Crockett.
And AWA, same time period. 86, 85, 86.
Is it true that Paul Jones and Porter Wagner shared the same tailor?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that doesn't count. Don't worry about it.
That was just a comedic interspersion.
It went over well. Good job, Howard.
Can we get that hot dog guy instead?
Hot dog, unfortunately, is preoccupied tonight. Okay, let me find something here. I'm looking through actually Death of the Territory. I'm going to try to find a really hard question for you. When did you start watching, Matt?
Well, I was at the 79 Battle Royal.
Oh, wow.
And the earliest TV that I remember is Andre getting his haircut.
So the first TV you remember is early 85.
Yeah, Andre getting his haircut.
But you were at the Battle Royal in 79?
Yes, sir.
Your parents are wrestling fans?
Yes, my dad was.
Your dad was. Oh, very good. Did he go a lot?
Yeah, he was a regular for a while there.
Who were his favorites?
The Guerreros and Pat and Ray, of course.
Pat, did he prefer Pat over Ray, or what did he think?
Actually, he preferred Pepper Gomez over the two.
Oh, wow. Wow, very interesting. Pat Patterson has a lot of girlfriends who think he's an animal, from what I understand.
Hey, you know what? I popped on the last show and I heard that. that was good.
He went out of his way. The guy didn't say, tell me about your girlfriends. Pat Patterson went out of his way to be like, look, I have a girlfriend. I'll say it twice.
That, in psychology, is what's known as overcompensation.
Matt, who's the last non-WWF wrestler, or let me clarify this, wrestler not associated with a Japanese organization with a WWF affiliation? Who's the last non-WWF wrestler to wrestle at Madison Square Garden after Vince McMahon's national expansion started?
Whoa. Non-affiliated with any other company?
Not affiliated with the World Wrestling Federation, because obviously by this point in time, Vince McMahon has cut off the magazines from having access. He's not working with other promoters he's not talking to other promoters unless he's trying to acquire other promoters. Who's the last?
I am going to go with Akira Maeda.
Well, I said not affiliated with a Japanese company that is aligned with the WWF. Because the way I see it is if New Japan's paying $1 million to book WWF talent, you can't consider them an outside organization because they have that agreement.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Okay, so Japanese talent. Oh, shit. That's a hell of a question.
And I didn't say it was Japanese. I said I'm excluding the Japanese.
Say it again, because that was like a trigonometry problem to me.
Yeah,
Who is the last non-WWF wrestler to wrestle at Madison Square Garden after Vince McMahon's national expansion? Obviously, Madison Square Garden frequently had guest appearances from wrestlers from every territory.
Right.
But then it stopped. Who was the last wrestler before it stopped? And I'm saying, don't count Akira Maeda. Don't count Dump Matsumoto. Don't count the Japanese. It has to be from one of the American territories.
You know what? I'm going to go with, I want to say J.J. Dillon.
Did you say J.J. Dillon?
I did.
Well, 2 questions, 2 winners. You win a copy of Death of the Territories, Matt.
Tremendous. I knew that, too, for the record. Tremendous.
Really makes you wonder what would have happened after, I shouldn't say after, but if Eddie Graham had not committed suicide, was he too toxic in terms of what was going on business-wise outside of wrestling to be involved in what Vince was trying to do, or would Vince have tried to have brought him in and used his brain or used him in some capacity?
Neither. He would have gotten in bed with the Pro Wrestling USA thing, and everybody would have failed. It wouldn't have changed. It would have been the same outcome.
Interesting.
I like that. I go with that. Because I can't see him really working within the WWF system, can you? I mean, he was used to being the man for so long. And he was tight, and he was tight with Jarrett and Vern, and of course he would have gone in with those guys.
How old was he?
50s, right? Like 55?
Considered a smart guy. Considered someone who could see what's happening in wrestling, correct? He sees what's happening. You don't think maybe he'll say, you know what? I'm not going to be able to withstand this. I'm not going to be able to hold this. He couldn't even hold on to Dusty at that time. And so think about it. I mean, that's all happening in the same period of time. What if Vince said, Eddie, let me buy you out. Come up here. You'll have to move to Connecticut, which that may be a deal breaker right there. And you could be an advisor. You could, again, the role that George Scott had, Pat Patterson had. Vince was surrounded by guys like that. And Eddie was actually one that his father spoke to, if not every day, almost every day.
Well, I'll tell you though, if Eddie was with the Pro Wrestling USA group, the finishes on the TV would have been a hell of a lot better.
That TV is awful, and it shouldn't be.
It's bad.
And
it's bad.
Yeah. You know what sucked about that? They used people in different roles. Like, they used Memphis guys, and, like, Eddie Gilbert was facing Lawler like they never heard of each other before. And stuff like that, That's all I got to say.
I thought Matt would jump in there. I'm giving Matt an opportunity here on the show to say a few things. I'm looking through the war chest here of substitute gifts we have. Let me see what I have.
But, I think somebody like a Pat Patterson would have been better suited personality-wise to be the finish man, to be Vince's right-hand man. I don't think Eddie Graham... I think he was a little too old school to fit into Vince's vision of what he had going forth from 83, 84, And plus, the legend is that Eddie Graham was the Grand Master, but Florida had some pretty sucky periods leading up to Eddie's demise. It was not that great in 85. It was not that great in 83. Like we discussed on a previous show, I think Florida peaked like 80, 81.
And then Dusty's gone. By 84, you lose Dusty. You lose the biggest star for the last decade. And once you lose him, you also lose the talent because he takes them with him.
Yeah. And just strictly from a booking standpoint, it's not like Eddie was working magic 83, 84. He was still around, and it was not like, it was not the golden era of Florida wrestling.
Well, that's why I said, and maybe I shouldn't have said, was he too toxic? But was there too much other stuff going on in Eddie Graham's life that would have prohibited him from being able to do that?
Yes. His roots were firmly in Florida. He was not going to move. the boys ran, the wrestling programs and all that other, civic stuff. He wasn't going to leave. Plus knowing the ego that he had, everything that he built as far as, being a man in that state, he wasn't going to leave. There's no way.
Yeah, it's like Watts. Like Watts couldn't, he would have lasted like Watts did with Vince. Like, if it's not their thing, I can't see them really relegating themselves to a right-hand man position. But Patterson never had that position of power before, so he jumped on it, so to speak.
If Eddie was up there, maybe instead of ring boys getting molested, they would have just been stretched and beaten up.
Allegedly.
Hey, Matt.
Here's a bonus trivia question. Who was worse? Antonio Rocca, Pat Patterson, or Bruno on commentary?
Bruno.
Patterson was the best. Well, hold on.
Really?
Rocca was the worst, by far.
Yeah, no doubt. Because he wasn't even funny. You couldn't even hate watch Rocca. I mean, Patterson was always funny because you kind of got what he was trying to say, but it would be comedic at the same time.
The clips I've seen of Rocca, it's almost like he's yelling, even though he's not. Vince is like, and we're here, Antonio. Next we have a big match coming up. We have Dominic DeNucci. I'll tell you, Vince, he's the dollar. Like, just screaming. So, I don't know. I didn't look at his cauliflower ears. And then Bruno came, and Bruno tried to bring dignity to the broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-wig and after wig. And I was thinking about it earlier today. Wouldn't it have been amazing if Bruno returned in 84 with the wig? Like, think about what a big decision it was for him to lose the wig.
They could have marketed Super Mario Brothers, with the Toad dude. That would have been him. Well, the mushroom head guy from the Mario games. That would have been, Bruno all the way with that freaking haircut.
All right. Well, Matt, we're going to move on with the show. I actually may stop the show. I don't know. We gave away both copies of Death of the Territories. Listen, if you could do me a favor, message the show and give me your address, and I'll get this book out to you at some point in the next week. And enjoy. And once again, this book, Death of the Territories by Tim Hornbaker, from our friends over at ECW Press. So we want to give them big thanks for supplying us with some copies here this week for the trivia contest.
And if you don't have Tim's the NWA book, you need to pick it up. It's a hell of a book.
Any final words for the 605ers, Matt?
Keep doing what you're doing, Brian. The good fight. And we appreciate, all the hard work that you do. I may piss and complain that, the shows aren't out, fast enough, but, it is what it is. You are the hardest working man in podcasts. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That actually, I didn't expect that, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying all that.
All right, guys, I got to wrap up here. I got a show tonight, so have a good one, and thanks for the book. Appreciate it.
Take it easy, Matt. Message me your address, and we'll take it from there. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Brian.
All right, take it easy, man.
Bye-bye.
And there we hear it. 2 contestants, 2 winners. This contest is a bust.
This is unforeseen. What's going to happen if everybody wins?
I've got some more gifts. I got some more prizes. Right. That's what I did once with Austin Idol. I mentioned gifts, and whenever I talk to him, he's like, Brian, you're sending gifts, or you're sending prizes? All right. We got a few more things. Who should we call? It's going to be disappointing.
Always looking towards a payday, Mr. Austin Idol.
Let's add this person. Hold on. This person has never been on the show, has never been a contestant on the show, has never been a guest on the program, and he will now be added to the show.
Hello.
Lou.
Yes.
Welcome to the 605 Super Podcast. This is the great Brian Last, and on the line with me, popular co-host Howard Baum.
Oh, man. I am blessed with...
It's a dream come true. The great Lou Kippelman. How are you, man?
Oh, wow. I'm better now.
Look at that, Howard. Cheering up people's days, making it better.
Where do you see what we have in store for you, Don?
Don?
Lou.
Who's Don?
Lou.
Yeah, wait until you see what we have in store for you. We don't even know who
it's subliminal. I have this big feud with my neighbor right now. His name is Don. So,
what's the deal with the
name?
Yeah,
big day, Lou. We actually have an addendum to the big contest that's going on here. I have a special addendum to the contest just for you.
Hold on, Howard. Couple things. And let me say a couple things. First of all, Lou, you need to know both copies that we had of Death of the Territories have already been won, but we have some substitute prizes you could potentially win here.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you that first. Second of all, Howard, what's going on with your neighbor? Now I need to know what this feud's about.
Okay, let me just tell you something. This is such a long, drawn-out feud, which I eventually won, but this is definitely not the format for it because it's so long I couldn't even do it justice. You would have to do 5 Star Wars in a row for me to even scratch the surface. Long story short, the guy, he said he was going to drop kick my precious Stinky, my adorable Chihuahua, the love of my life.
What?
And from that day on, I made his life a living hell. I got him evicted. He's gone. And that's the long and short of it. But what happened in between was like the quintessential nightmare neighbor feud. But I won.
All right. Well, there we go.
One day it's so much I don't even want to get into it.
All right. No, that's all right. We'll just fantasize about what Howard versus Don may have been and what may have caused it. But you said you had something you wanted to talk to Lou about before we ask him these trivia questions for substitute prizes.
Well, did you want to give him the real questions first, and then we could do the lightning round, or do you want me to do my spiel first? And
I'm very curious to hear what this lightning round you keep talking about is. What is your lightning round?
Well, I think it might cap off Lou's segment, but I wasn't on the Yom Kippur special, and I had all this Jewish-orientated material that I couldn't get to, unfortunately. So what I wanted to do was add a non-qualifying round of Jew or not a Jew.
Didn't we just do this? We just did this on the show, didn't we?
No, but not a Howard Baum edition.
Oh, okay.
Not a Howard Baum edition.
No, that's true.
And this is you never know what's missing until it's gone.
No.
So
apparently Kelly and the Sandman are Jewish, according to Bix.
I was very impressed with finding out that Kelly and Medusa, of all people, very nice. It's good for our people.
Yeah, what's up, Kelly?
Glad to have him.
I just want to say that.
I still can't believe Sandman. I'm with you. If
There's
he's
no way.
Jewish, I'll eat my hat.
No fucking way.
A professional alcoholic with a Philly accident, like he's Jewish.
Yeah, no way.
No way.
He would never be in my Hebrew school class. Never.
Oh, could you imagine? He'd come in to enter Sandman and knock a beer against his head.
Although it would be funny if his gimmick was him drinking Manischewitz instead of him drinking beer. If he just spilled Manischewitz all over himself in the ring.
Yes, it's hardcore hack, everybody.
Very good.
You gotta get like
Absolutely, the CH is essential.
Lou's got a sense of humor. Lou's pretty cool. Howard, what did you say is Jew or not a Jew?
Yeah. So if you're willing, Lou, let's start Jew or not a Jew, the Howard Baum edition. So let's get right into it. Don Curtis, real name Thank you. Don Curtis, real name Don Beetleman.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I'm going to say that's more Germanic than Jewish, so I will say not a Jew.
Correct. Not a Jew.
Good.
I had a guy. There was a guy named David at my old post office who swore, based on the fact that his name was Don Beetleman, that Don Curtis was Jewish, and the fact that he teamed up with Mark Lewin, in my estimation, the greatest Jewish wrestler of all time, for longevity and physical impressiveness. I'm like, maybe. And then I asked Don's widow, and she said, nope, not a Jew. So there you go. Dickie Steinborn.
All right. Dick Steinborn. Man. And his father was named Milo. And I think Milo emigrated from Germany. I'm going to say not a Jew.
I actually didn't do my research. I just wanted to put that out there.
So you don't even know the answer? Hold on, you don't even know the fucking answer?
I have no idea.
I believe Dick Steinborn is a Jew.
Something tells me I don't think he's Jewish, though. That's why I kind of put it in there as a twist. I really don't think he's Jewish.
I will message Bix and get a confirmation, but you can't ask him if you don't know. Like that's
well, this is why it's unofficial. There are no wagering and there are no prizes on the line for this portion of the lightning round. Let that be perfectly clear.
All right.
Wow.
Are you done messaging Bix? I want to get on to the third.
I haven't started yet because you paused. I jumped in to say, don't pause.
Okay. Well, there's nothing on the line. So the number 3, Jew or not a Jew? Bobby Blaze.
Well, let's see.
You got to be kidding me. Come on.
He's thinking about it.
Well, I'm just thinking how Jewy a name Smedley is.
Okay, and of course there's a Memphis stalwart Big Jew Winston.
Come on, this just went. All right, you're talking about Lou Winston. Now you just completely have gone off the rails.
Dr. Tom Pritchard.
Doctor? Well, yeah, he didn't go to wrestling. Didn't go to wrestling medical school for 6 years, without having that background.
He's a doctor. He's a doctor. I wanted to put that out there. And of course, this one is a real brain teaser. Goldberg, Bill Goldberg.
Bill Goldberg. Definitely a Jew.
Not a Jew. Not a Jew.
Oh,
kidding. Thanks for playing, and that's the Howard Baum edition of Jew, Not a Jew.
That was the worst game we've ever had on this show.
Wow.
There were a couple nuggets in there. I just wanted to get them out of my system.
Big Jew Winston. All right. Well, we actually have real questions that you can win prizes for here. Lou, you put that your favorite angle from the 80s was Randy Savage crushing Ricky Steamboat's windpipe. By the way, guys, David Bixenspan is not sure if Dick Steinborn is Jewish. So now it's all up in the air. But anyway, back to this question here. Lou, question 1. You have to answer 3 questions to win a prize.
Mm-hmm.
In 1983, Barry Windham wore a mask while wrestling in Florida. What was his name?
Too easy.
His name? Well, easy for you to say, Mr. Florida.
No, that's number 1, Paul Jones. That's a bonus question.
Oh, yeah, there we go, 1980. Barry Windham was the yellow dog, or the dirty yellow dog, I believe.
Wow, very, very good. That's one down. One down. Good job, Lou. Question 2.
Thank you.
What match went on directly before Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3?
Oh, boy. Oof.
Biggest match of all time? What match went on right before it?
Let's see, as a semi-main. Well,
let me stop you. I'm going to help you more than I should, but it was not the semi-main. It was just a match on the WrestleMania card. Remember, the World Wrestling Federation didn't stack their cards the way most promotions did, where it built up and you had the semi-main, then the main. Often the main event was in the middle of the show, but in this case, the main event was the last match on the show. But I would say any semi-mains, whether it's Steamboat versus Savage or Piper versus Adrian Adonis, those were earlier in the card, so they were not directly before the main event.
Okay. And those were exactly the 2 I was thinking of.
I'll give you a chance here. You could ask a friend, and the only friend is Howard Baum.
Oh, yeah, we know what a font of accurate information Howard is here.
My goodness.
Before we go any further, Howard, without saying it, do you know the answer to this question?
Okay, the funny thing is, as I was just doing what I was doing, I was thinking to myself, I wonder when I'm going to get busted, because I have a little habit I do during the show where I think I can sneak away and freshen up my Jack and Coke, and that's exactly what I just did over the last 30 seconds.
So you don't know the question.
So I completely missed. I was trying to fake it. I completely missed the whole thing.
Okay, so what do you think
What was the question?
Is?
What was the question quickly?
No. Tell me what you think the answer is.
I don't even know I didn't hear the question.
Doesn't matter.
We're talking Jack and Coke.
We're talking 1980s trivia. What do you think the answer was?
The answer? I have no idea.
All right, here's the question.
Was the name?
Here's the question.
Just when you think Howard has the answer, we change the question.
That's right.
I don't run from nobody.
Hey, Lou, you're all right. Thanks for being here today. Here's the question. The question's to Lou. I don't know why I'm asking you now. I just wanted to know if you knew the answer. But what match went on directly before Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, Pontiac, Michigan, March 1987?
I did hear that before I snuck out, and I had no idea. That's why I decided to sneak out. I really have no idea because they were so random. And, I'm not the biggest WWF fan, so I have zero idea.
Well, there's your friend.
Yeah. Yeah, you're still my pal,
Is Lou a
Howard.
big WWF aficionado? Is that like your main?
Well, sorta. I live in San Francisco, so I started following wrestling with AWA and then WWF. So,
my condolences.
no. WrestleMania 3? Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Well,
I'm still sitting Shiva.
Yeah, but Lou, what AWA did you start with? Like, what was it? Like 81 or 83? What did you start seeing?
It would have been around summer of 84. The first real vivid memory I have is Bruiser Brody coming in and busting up the High Flyers.
Yeah.
And then around the same time, I found WWF as well. So, yeah, WrestleMania 3, I actually saw it on closed circuit at the Cow Palace.
What was that like?
And so it was a pretty packed house. I was 15 years old at the time. It was to celebrate a friend's birthday. So, God, I'm trying to think, because the Adonis and Piper retirement match, of course, Steamboat Savage, classic match.
Classic.
I'm trying to think of the others. There was like the Dream Team match. I think it was a 6-man, like the Dream Team and Bravo.
Well, no, Bravo escorted them to ringside, but it was actually just a regular straight tag team match. The Dream Team of Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine versus the Rougeau brothers, who were not yet fabulous.
Oh, okay. So the Rougeaus back then. Okay.
But that's not the answer, by the way, just in case I misled anyone in thinking that was the answer of what is the match that went on right directly before Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. But we do need an answer soon, because now that I'm thinking about it, you're basically just going to run down the entire roster until we say yes.
Yeah.
Hey, if you didn't look it up, if you didn't look it up by now, Lou, that's on you.
All right, Lou, final answer, Lou.
Okay, all right. Now you're finally useful, Howard. Let me check this out.
No,
Come on.
final answer right now.
Okay. Shoot.
Wake up, jackass.
Oh man.
Not looking good. Not looking good.
No, it's not. So what's Bruno going to tell me?
You stupid idiot! No, Vince was.
Oh, I'm a stupid idiot. Okay.
According to Vince, of course.
Oh, sure.
You're running out of time. Here comes the final end buzzer.
Okay. I'm
final answer.
Bix. I'm gonna say King Kong Bundy squashing Little Beaver.
No, unfortunately, Lou. That day in the Cow Palace, the memories have faded. The match before Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, directly before it, the Killer Bees versus Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff.
Ooh.
Oh, I have been made humble.
Well, remember, Jim Duggan humbled the Sheik and Volkoff that night, running in, hitting them with his 2x4, one of the early Jim Duggan appearances before being found on the New Jersey Turnpike with cocaine and marijuana and that same Iron Sheik. The good old days.
Indeed.
It was a valiant effort.
Yeah, very good. Lou, I'll tell you what, if you want, you can hang out on the line for a little bit while we play a little more. You were actually all right.
Lou's a good man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, hold on.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, you've been
He's
fun.
an old school linesman. He's
Not
a good
that
man.
everyone else wasn't fun, but they already won, so they can get the hell out of here. Let's add another person, another contestant here. If I can find
We were going down the list, we were debating who was going to get the bonus lightning round, the special edition of Jew, Not Jew, and I said, we got to do it with Lou. That's the man.
All right, I'm adding this person now. We're adding another person. I think we are. Let's see.
Hello?
Look out, Baron von Raschke! Oh, diesel gravity!
Oh, that's great.
Is this Supermarket Kane that I've been hearing so much about for so long?
Yeah, it is indeed. It is indeed.
Chris, I assume it's pronounced Zaha? Welcome to Superpodcast.
Oh, thank you. You called just in time because the band's loading in and I don't want to help them. So you called just in time.
My kind of guy. On the line with us right now, popular co-host Howard Baum, as well as someone who was a contestant earlier and bombed out, Lou Killipman. Did I say your name correctly?
Actually, it's Kippelman.
Excuse me. I was telling Howard before, I looked at it on Facebook, and the I, the K, and the P, everything all jointed together. I couldn't get it out right, but thank you.
It's so gravity all over again with you, man.
Yes, and
It's another Sam Hell incident. Chris Zaha, I'm honored. My deepest, humblest apologies.
Man? How are you?
My deepest apologies for shitting all over your childhood hero, the man they call Stink.
Sadly, he's my adulthood hero too. So I don't know.
There's no helping you, man.
All right, Chris, we've got good news and we've got bad news. I'm going to give you the bad news first.
Okay.
The copies of Death of the Territories have already been won by actually the first contestants we had on the show. They immediately won the prizes. However,
good for them.
We have some substitute prizes that you could potentially win right here on the Super Podcast. But you have to answer 3 trivia questions correctly. This, of course, 1980s trivia. You have said that your favorite angle of the 1980s was Roddy Piper turning face in the flower shop. We should say that Lou's favorite angle was Randy Savage crushing Ricky Steamboat's windpipe. So we're talking the same era, guys. We're talking 86, 87 WWF.
Awesome.
Chris, why is that your favorite angle?
I'm a huge Piper fan. I love him when even when he was bad, I still loved him just because he was just so entertaining and hilarious. So when he turned good, I'm like, oh, good. Now I could cheer him without, feeling guilty.
Yeah.
There we go. See, that we can agree upon. Me and Chris have some common ground. Piper's my number 1 man of all time.
Although I have a feeling you never felt any guilt for cheering him.
I was actually disappointed in the face turn. I felt like I only liked the heels. So once he became popular, I'm like, I
have always contested that it's impossible to have been a Roddy Piper fan in the 1980s and not gone through at least a brief phase where you tried to be Roddy Piper. It could have been a day, it could have been a weekend, it could have been a month. But you definitely went through a period of time where you just think that you can, you just want to behave like that. You want to do that for at least a period, but it never works out.
Tom Pritchard never grew out of it. He made a whole career out of it.
I never understood why he did that. I really didn't. Because when I first saw him when I was a kid on Global, and I hear that, I'm like, who's that doing a Roddy Piper impersonation?
Yeah, it was so obvious.
Yeah, it was much better when he started just being himself a little more and Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Yeah, I like the Heavenly Bodies. That was like my favorite Tom Pritchard era.
That's the best Tom Pritchard era. Tom Pritchard.
Yeah.
Tom Pritchard may be one of the best wrestlers in the wrestling business during the Heavenly Bodies period. And no one says that, but I saw a lot of those shows live, and you go back and watch his work in and out of the ring, and he had a hurt neck during a large period of that time, I think from Wrestling the Fantastics early on in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but his work during that period of time is just excellent. And I saw it live. He was amazing.
Yeah, Jimmy Backlund was underrated too. He was a good little worker.
He was a bit of a dickhead though. And that's not even getting into him. Apparently he drugged some woman, which is why he was fired from the World Wrestling Federation. But yeah, not a big Jimmy Backlund.
I did not know that.
Allegedly.
Well, we know he was a well-known arsonist at Fan Week.
Well, yes. 2 years in a row, he lit Marty Gorman on fire in multiple ways. So that is true. But we do have questions. Chris, I forgot we had questions for you. Some of these questions I forgot you were there. Hi, Chris. All right. First question.
Hi.
You know what? I'm going to ask you this. I can't ask you this one yet. All right.
Great.
Yeah, no, this one.
Chris, what are you opening? What are you opening with tonight, Chris? What's the first song?
We're actually doing the Immigrant song, but not doing the fixed version.
Oh, really? How cool! How cool!
Well, there you go.
All right.
He can help me out tonight.
Chris, what year did Vince McMahon purchase the World Wrestling Federation?
80. Oh God, I'm gonna get this wrong right away. 80. It's either 83 or 84. So, 84.
The earlier one.
Oh, what?
You wake up, you son of a bitch. I hope you die in the next 30 minutes, you motherfucking bastard.
I accidentally played them at the same time. Hold on, I've never done that before. Let me try that again.
Wake up, you motherfucker.
Well, Chris, you got the question wrong in case you haven't been able to tell.
I was going to say, I guess it's wrong.
Yes. The answer was 1982. Vince McMahon purchased the World Wrestling Federation June of 1982 officially, made installment payments until 1983. I guess technically that would make your answer correct, but I'm not going to accept it.
There you go.
Because you're a Sting fan. Hey, let me ask you this.
Ooh, I was pulling for you, Chris.
Hold on.
I was pulling for you, man.
I'm giving Chris a chance to redeem himself. Chris, if you get this question right, you start from 0, but you're back in. Okay?
Okay. All right.
What match went on directly before Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, 1987?
It was, what's it called? Was it Killer Bees and Sheik and Volkoff?
There you go.
Woo!
You're back in the game.
Nice.
Lou, what do you think?
Wow. Oh
Lou
my God. I'm sorry.
Lou had a 20-minute filibuster trying to figure that one out, and he still got it wrong. I certainly didn't know it. Kudos to you, Chris. Tremendous.
Chris, you're back in. You're back in. That's one question. I'm going to give you credit for that.
Okay, thanks. All right, cool. Thanks.
Name 5 members of Jimmy Hart's first family.
He's going to get this in a heartbeat, standing on his head.
In a heartbeat? Was that a pun?
I think you did. The first family. So we're talking about Memphis then, or we talking about?
We're talking Memphis. We're talking 1980 to 1985. I don't remember him ever calling it the first family in the World Wrestling Federation, but I could be wrong.
There's even one guy that you could name both of his identities, one in Memphis, one in WWF.
See,
I don't think that helped anyone. What did you just say?
Which I know is like a sin.
You could name the 2 of those guys are one guy. One of them had blonde hair, one of them had dark hair, and they were both the same guy, and they were both in the Hart Foundation.
Chris, just 5
or the first family. However you want to phrase
you're giving away answers. You're giving away.
I'm not. I don't think he's going to get that.
You just gave away one of the answers.
No, he seems so stumped.
All right, you got Jim the Anvil Neidhart. That's one.
Right.
Name 4 more.
That's not who I was. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so, crap. I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to seem ridiculous. All right, was Coco Lair one of his guys?
Get it together, Chris. Come on. Take that one back. Sorry. Go for it for real. Come on.
Can you ask me about, like, Black Sabbath's second album or something?
Okay. You ready? I'll give you one more chance. I'm going to give you one more chance. Name every NWA champion in order from Kerry Von Erich to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Okay. So, Kerry, Flair, Dusty Flair, Ronnie Garvin, Flair, Ricky Steamboat.
There you go. All right, 2 questions.
Oh, wow.
One more, and you win.
Oh, dang.
Nice.
One more to win a prize. I got to give him a little bit of a hard one.
Isn't this exciting, Chris? It's like being part of a Star Wars or something, isn't it?
I feel like I'm part of the show.
Yeah.
Well, you are part of the show right now.
We haven't even reached Jew, not a Jew yet.
No, that was only for Lou.
Yeah.
That was a special lightning round for the
come on, let the going in.
Technically, Lou lost 2 contests in the last half hour here on the show. All right, here's your question, Chris.
All right.
I lost the question. Where the fuck was it? Here we go. This is going to be a harder one. This is one you win something. The Houston Wrestling Office was involved with 4 booking offices in the 1980s. What were they in order?
Ooh. That's hard.
Houston Wrestling, I don't know. Mid-South, Georgia, Memphis, and New Japan. I don't know.
Oh, you're right. You got it right.
No way, really?
No, of course not. No.
You missed FMW.
Well, Chris,
that's amazing.
You did well. I'll tell you what, Chris, I'm going to give you a consolation prize for playing here this week. I will send it to you. Message the show. Give us your name and address. Well, we know your name, but give us your address, and we will send you a consolation prize this week. Lou, same thing for you. Send in your address and name to the show on the Facebook page, and you win a consolation prize, too.
You can reach me at Mariano's in Buffalo Grove, Illinois.
That's right. Don't you forget it. Don't you forget it.
What am I missing? What's the inside joke there?
That's where I work.
Oh. You're a little bit of like a celebrity in the Mothership group, I feel.
I am. I get a lot of fan mail, actually.
What do you do with it?
Facebook Messenger.
Oh.
Nothing.
All right. Well, you got a show tonight, and you've already won, so I'm going to let you jump off the line because you actually have things to do. But message the show with your address. Chris, it's actually really nice to talk to you for the first time because I've always seen your name, so I appreciate how supportive you've always been of the various shows, including, of course, Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdrin and Barry. So thank you. I really do appreciate that, man.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the 27 chances you gave me to get one question right.
Yeah, somehow. How did we fucking win something? How did we do this that we worked it, that both of these guys lost, and they're still getting prizes?
We're talk about bending over backwards. Two of my favorite 605ers. We tried, guys.
All right.
Great.
Well,
That's
Chris,
awesome.
I'm going to let you go. Thanks for competing.
All right, man.
And we'll talk again
Thank
soon.
you.
You'll be back on the show again. You're a good guest.
All right, man.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, my man.
All right. Take it easy. Have a good
Bye,
day.
man. Have fun at the gig tonight.
All right, thank you, brother. I'll talk to you.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Lou, you're still there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Hang on. Let's get one more contestant at least. Let me cross off this person. This one will be interesting.
All right.
Let me call this guy. For those of you just joining the show, Lou is sitting in.
How's it going, Mothershippers?
There we go. You have a good radio voice, Lou. Have you done any broadcasting?
Well, a little bit here and there. Nothing that pays.
Nothing that pays. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Hold on. Let me add this person here. This person will be joining the show momentarily. This is someone who has actually previously won the trivia contest. So I'm going to give a previous winner a chance here.
He's like the Yomamba or the House of Galeen of trivia contest.
Hello. I'm sorry that happened.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing?
At work right now, but I don't care.
Oh,
I'm all right.
Oh my God! It's the dysphamic wrestling fan. I recognize him anywhere.
No, I thought you
Oh
wanted
my
to
God!
contest it.
I recognize that voice
I'm back to
anywhere.
reclaim my title.
Oh my God! It's all happening again.
That's right.
Oh, holy
Well, here
jeez.
we have on the show Sean Akers. Now, Sean has something that not many people can say to his credit. He is a previous 605 trivia question. Is that correct?
That is affirmative. That is for true.
That is for true. There you go. That's the correct answer.
Is that for true?
Sean, do you remember what questions you got right?
From last time?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I think it was Bix's other impression, or his only impression, rather.
That's never going to get old, by the way.
Ed Whalen.
Ed Whalen. His Ed Whalen is excellent.
No, I forget the other two.
Well, listen, Sean, here's what I got some bad news for you to start off. And by the way, on the line with us right now is Howard Baum and very special guest, Lou.
Lou.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just like Kevin.
Not familiar with Lou.
Well, Sean.
His gimmick is no gimmick.
The bad news here. The copies that we had of Death of the Territories by Tim Hornbaker, of course, out on ECW Press. Those copies have been already won by previous contestants. We have some consolation prizes that you could potentially win here on the Super Podcast.
All right.
If you're interested. I mean, you may want to just say, fuck it, I wanted the book. I'm out.
I'll take what I can get.
Take what you can get. Now, Sean, you said your favorite angle of the 1980s was the Mega Powers Explode. Why?
That is for true.
Why is that your favorite?
Oh, because I think that was about the time when I really got into wrestling when, I hear other kids talking about, like, I knew who Hulk Hogan was, but then I'm like, and I remember liking the Iron Sheik just because of the way he looked. I don't know. I couldn't tell you why. I also as a kid, I used to like Gorbachev because he had a birthmark. So what do I know about politics? But I think that's because.
How do you feel about Marcia Clark?
I could take her or leave her.
but again, we're going back to the angle. The Mega Powers Explode.
Yeah. It was because I knew who the Macho Man was too. So I'm like, whoa, because, when you're not smart, you're like, whoa, those two going at it. And then later on, I think it was within a year or two, the Ultimate Warrior and Hogan going at it was like, holy shit.
But let me ask you something. We talked a little bit about this earlier in the show, and Lou, you could jump in and opine after Sean gets a word in. Looking back now, is Macho Man in the wrong? Hulk Hogan's trying to get with his girl.
It's, knowing what we know now about Randy, about his possessive nature. But I could see where he's coming from, but maybe he overreacted.
Sean, If I came over to your house and you were hanging out with your girlfriend and I picked your girlfriend up, by the way, she's not wearing a skirt. She'd ripped that off to impress some other guys. And I take your girlfriend and I put her on my big oily shoulders and I rub her thigh and I smile and I show her my muscles while her man, you, is standing next to me also doing it. And you're also much smaller than me. You really think Randy Savage isn't wrong to be upset with Hulk Hogan there?
Oh, I'd be livid.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, no, he's totally in the right. So, but then you have to go into intention too. He's the Hulkster. He never does anything wrong. Yeah, he's the good guy.
See,
so
now you're getting into
he wouldn't do that to Randy.
You're getting into the philosophy of Hulk Hogan, the philosophy of Hulkamania. Hulk Hogan would never do that kind of thing because Hulk Hogan in the 1980s in the WWF is like this sexless creature. He's like this big testosterone muscle guy, but you never see him with any women.
Yeah, he's wholesome.
Sure, if you're not a subscriber to Wii magazine.
Well, that's right. I've seen that picture of him and those two girls there.
Wii is an OUI?
Yes.
No, I was too young to get Wii at that age. I couldn't find it in the stands when I got old enough, but I digress.
And by the way, haven't we all been sexless creatures at some point in time?
I currently am, so.
Well, let's see. Maybe you win this contest and it changes everything for you.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right. Well, let's get first question. You have to answer 3 questions to win whatever the mystery gift is that you will be winning. Prize, I should say, not gift. Prize, excuse me.
Yes.
Other than this period of time in the World Wrestling Federation that we're talking about for your favorite angle, is there anything else from the 1980s that you specifically would think that you have an expertise in? For wrestling, that is.
In wrestling or in general from the 80s?
In wrestling.
Oh, I think probably not because at that point, 80s WWF in the Northeast, that's pretty much all I could get. So.
Okay. So because I don't want to ask you things that you clearly would not know at all. That's what my question is. But let me go. Question 1.
Go for it.
Question 1. Who did Hulk Hogan wrestle at Shea Stadium?
Oh, fuck.
No, not this one. Come on. Not oh, fuck on this one.
Shea Stadium.
Stop the murder on TV.
Shea Stadium. Oh, yeah, shit. I know his opponents, but goddamn it, the stadiums. Oh, shit.
That's a giveaway.
Howard's trying as hard as he can to let every contestant know the answers.
I like to rub it in. I like to rub it in big time.
Shea Stadium. It was. No, it wasn't that. It was the Iron Sheik.
When you get that stupid fool out of here.
No. Hulk Hogan, 1980, Shea Stadium. The correct answer, Lee Mazzilli. No, I kid. The answer, Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant. I'm going to give you a chance.
I thought that was...
Well, you thought that was what?
I thought it was Marvelous
I was
Marv
thinking the Pontiac.
You were thinking Pontiac. Well, WrestleMania 3 was obviously Hogan versus Andre, but remember, Hogan and Andre had a feud in the WWF in 1980, and it was one of the semi-main events on Shea Stadium.
Oh, okay. Oh, the 8, yeah, okay. Yeah, that would have... I know it happened, but it's not like, it's like in the footnote of what you think of when Hulk Hogan and Andre go at it. But
I'm going to give you one chance to redeem yourself and get back in here.
All right.
Or hopefully you don't get fired.
Name the crowd number at Shea Stadium for that very show.
No, what did Phil Zacco say the crowd number for that Shea Stadium show was?
Another giveaway.
Fuck. It was, all right, it ends in 50. It's
That's right.
70,850.
No, but I'm going to, that's a good guess. It was, let me tell you something. It drew 87,250. He just completely pulled that number out of it. I was just watching earlier today, David Wright, longtime third baseman for the Mets, is finishing up his career today. So they showed on SNY, the Mets television channel, career highlights all through today, and I watched a few. And it was one from, I think, 2006 at Shea Stadium, 2 years before they knocked it down. And it was Mets versus Yankees. I think it was 56,000. And they're like, this is the second biggest crowd in the history of Shea Stadium. Now, I guess the first biggest is Phil Zacco's mysterious Shea Stadium Phantom card. 87,000. All right, here's your, Sean, I'm going to give you a chance to get back in. If you get this question right, you get a chance to jump back into the contest.
All right.
What match went on directly before Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3?
That would have been...
And if you can't figure it out, you're allowed to ask Lou. No, you're not. Not for this one, actually.
I'm like, all right.
Yeah. No, don't ask me.
I'm like, in that case. Oh. Was it the Macho Steamboat match? Yeah.
I'm sorry, that what I just played made it sound like maybe you got it right. Actually, that's wrong.
That's not my dad!
Yeah, I'm like, what?
That was a very misleading
I was like, I got that right?
sound drop there.
That's not my dad! That's not my dad! That's not my dad!
Baby.
All right, well, Sean, you couldn't do it 2 years in a row, but you did it 1 year, so that's better than most.
Yeah.
But you do get a consolation prize, so send in your address once again to the show, and you will get something. I can't say it'll be much. I guarantee nothing. It could be crap. You may hate it. You may just throw it away. It may just be an envelope. No, it won't be that. But either way.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
I appreciate you playing again. And as always, I appreciate how supportive you've been of the show.
I appreciate too.
All right, Sean. Well, listen, get back to work so you don't get fired because I can't have that on my conscience. But thanks for playing. Thanks for supporting the show. Send in your address.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
Should I, am I going to, should I just hang up on my own, or are you going to kick me off this time? Or can you actually hang up on me, or how do you kick somebody off?
That's been one of the problems I've been dealing with here. Hold on, which one of these is your number? This is your number.
I don't mind being kicked off, so that way you can.
No, it's not letting me kick you off.
Huh.
So technically, you could hijack the show right now.
Yeah, I could be the second co-host if you know.
Well, third, losing.
I'm sure all the listeners will really love that. But no, I probably should get back to work. I had somebody come in the store, and I'm like, oh shit. Oh well.
Right. Well, hopefully you have a better day at work than you did here in this contest.
Well, I think even Steven at this point. But all right. Well, have a good one.
All right. Take care, Sean. Thanks for playing.
You too. Adios.
Adios.
Trademark enthusiasm of the dysthymic wrestling fan, Sean Akers.
I think we're good. I mean, we've given away some prizes. I think that's it. I think that's the contest for this show. What do you guys think?
Sounds like a winner to me.
Friends.
What, say that again, Lou?
We made some new friends.
We made some new friends.
Learned a few things.
That's right. Lou made his debut on the show.
We bonded as fellow members of the tribe, both wrestling and Judaic.
Don't tell anyone. I think they get the show in the South. You don't want to put it out there too much.
Well, you know what? We only went an hour and 15, give or take, so this will not be a special. This will be a part of the next episode. So as we wrap things up here in the segment, for popular co-host Howard Baum and Lou, I'm going to try to say your name again. Where the fuck is it?
Yeah, Kippelman.
Kippelman. I had it. You didn't have to jump in, Lou. I had it. Lou, what match went on directly before the Killer Bees versus the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff?
I'll never forget that now.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was Aretha Franklin versus Ray Charles. Was that it?
No, but Aretha, of course, did open and close WrestleMania 3. Who's zooming who during the credits? But we're going to wrap things up. Howard, Lou, thanks for being a part of this today. And we will return to the Super Podcast right now after this short interstitial music. Right now. Boom.
Bye-bye, everybody.
We are back after whatever that previous segment was. Here on the Super Podcast, I'm very happy to welcome back a friend of the show, a great friend of mine, someone who is not only a wrestling historian, but a great wrestler and promoter, and that is the Tennessee stud, Ron Fuller. Ron, welcome to the Super Podcast.
Oh, thank you very much, Brian. It's always a pleasure. I've been on with you before. It's been along quite a while back, but man, I love your program, and it's a great honor to be here, man.
Wanted to talk to you about a couple things real quick as we move on with the show, but as I'm editing the show this week, obviously this storm has just wiped out the Panhandle, and I hate to say it, I see this, and I see the towns, and I'm thinking of you, and I'm thinking of Southeastern. I see Pensacola. I see Panama City. I see all these towns that I know that you made a big impression on, and made a big impression on you, so wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about that, if you don't mind, and maybe let's start with some of your thoughts, having seen everything you've seen on the news.
It's tragic. I mean, it just, I used to go to Panama City when I first started going there, and I started Southeastern Championship down there. We weren't based out of Pensacola at that point, just getting started, and I was staying in hotels, and I would intentionally spend Wednesday and Thursdays in Panama City because I love that beach there. It's just a beautiful white sand beach, just fantastic. Similar to Pensacola, they're both beautiful beaches. Panama City was just a pretty, pretty beach, and I just tried to get there and spend as much time as I could. It's I've got friends, all kinds of friends and family and fans out from that part of the country, and it's just horrible to see that. I have a girlfriend that actually her mom lives in Mariana, and oddly enough, that hurricane is so strong that it came in as almost a Category 5, and the eye went over the town of Mariana, and it was still a 3, almost 100 miles inland. Just a phenomenally strong hurricane. Maybe even a long time before you see another one like that. It's just devastating to those people. And I feel so sorry for them, and I wish them the best. They sure have my prayers, and all of them. They're tough people there. They help each other in that part of the country. It's really funny. I've already heard a lot of stories about people I heard of a gentleman that mows lawns. I heard this today, and he's up in that same Mariana, in that Panhandle area, just north of Panama City. And trees have been the real problem there. It's not, the wind was so powerful that it just broke trees in half, and it crushed the big oaks. They all collapsed on houses, and that's where most of the damage has come from. And a guy comes by, he mows lawns, and he had his entire crew. He pulled into some person's house, and they were putting it on Facebook, something about it on Facebook, and he asked them, he said, "Would you like me to help you?" And they go, "Yeah, how much do you want?" And he says, "I don't want anything." He goes, I'm take my whole crew here. Let's get your yard cleared if we can. That's the type of people they are up there, and you just really feel for people that have experienced that, and wish there was more I could do for them. I was on Facebook Live the other night, and had a little deal that I talked about the people and how much they mean to me in that part of the country. So this is great. You're giving me an opportunity to bolster that right now. That is a phenomenally beautiful part of the country there, and great people there, and tragic event.
Of course, if you're listening at home and you would like to help, you can go to redcross.org or dial 1-800-RED-CROSS and donate whatever you can. Of course, it's Hurricane Michael. You could text the word Michael to 90999 to make a $10 donation to help out the victims of Hurricane Michael. Ron, did you typically have a lot of worries during hurricane season when you were promoting in Pensacola?
Well, you never really think about hurricanes kind of till they come, I mean, that particular part of the Gulf Coast is hurricane prone. It's been that way for many, many years. You can go back to Camille that hit Mississippi, a little west of that area. That was just second most powerful hurricane I was reading the other day that ever hit America. And then Katrina in New Orleans. I mean, that Gulf Coast, once they get into the Gulf of Mexico, you can expect you have a potential problem. And I watched Katrina very carefully in whatever year, I think that's 2005 or somewhere in that time frame. Yeah. And I watched it explode one night in its cross. It came from out of the Caribbean across the lower end of Florida and back into the Gulf. And then I remember the night before it was going to get into New Orleans, I went to sleep and I watching the report, and it was a Category 2. And there's a certain spot in the Gulf of Mexico in the center area that I call it the deadly zone. Katrina went through that deadly zone. And I woke up the next morning, turned on my TV to Katrina, and it was a 5. I was like, wow, the whole Gulf of Mexico was a hurricane. I'd never seen a satellite shot like that. And I saw this one start in the Caribbean down there around Cozumel. Not the Caribbean, but Cozumel, just the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. And I was telling couple of people that I knew that, this hurricane looks like to me it's going to go through that, I call it the dead zone, because it's just going to kill people after it goes through there. And this one did the same thing. It blew up in that center of that Gulf of Mexico, that warm water that was 4 or 5 degrees warmer than the rest of the Gulf of Mexico. And it was just a disaster in the making, in my opinion. I feel so sorry for those people.
When you look at some of the towns that were really hit hard with this most recent hurricane, obviously there were a lot of towns that you were in for many, many years. And I'm curious about some of your favorite memories of those specific towns. I know I just saw pictures of Panama City not too long ago. And beyond you getting stabbed, you're not allowed to pick your stabbing as your favorite memory from a city. Not that it would be, but what are your favorite memories from Panama City and some of the other towns that you've seen on the news the last couple of days?
Well, I do remember Panama City primarily in spring break time of year. People came from Atlanta and all northern parts of Alabama, all over the South, basically. But that was such a vibrant place and a fun place to be, and everybody enjoying themselves, and beautiful, like I said, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. They got that white sand, and it's all soft, and it's just it's a great place to live and a great place to take a vacation. And, people that I feel for those people that bought homes down there and that had those condos, and just the devastation that happened, and all of that is just hard. But my favorite times down there, obviously, were spring break times. I was single at that time, and I really enjoyed hanging out on those beaches. And on those times during spring break, I'd turn that 2-day thing in Panama City into more like a 4-day thing. I would make trips after Mobile and drive back to Panama and spend the night rather than stay in Mobile. Yeah, Panama, it was really funny. We ran Panama early on when we went there in 78, and it was in an old, I think it had been a skating rink, and they had modified the building and changed it into a wrestling arena. It didn't hold a whole lot of people, and we finally got to where we didn't go there very often. But by the end of certainly by 84, they built a Coliseum there, a civic center downtown, and a beautiful building. And we went back to Panama, and we were going in there about once a month and utilizing it as a spot show and drawing tremendous crowds there. I mean, we were drawing 4 times more people than we were in that small skating rink that we originally started there in 78. By that point, our talent had grown tremendously. Continental had replaced Southeastern, and we had great talent. And when you go once a month into those towns, those fans are just waiting on that once a month Saturday night. We were going in there on Fridays, usually good night, kind of the beginning of the weekend, and drawing big money. And then you were only 100 miles from Dothan, where we were going to be on Saturday night. And guys would stay sometimes in Panama City and not go to Dothan until the next day, too, because it was still a great town and a great place to have a good time.
Did you book around spring break?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's an easy ticket there. I mean, you're going to do well. You got all those people in town. We were running it once a month. Sometimes in the springtime, we would jump at to twice a month. We would go in there 2 times in that month, in that time frame, in which they're all doing good. And it's not just the kids that are down there and people enjoying themselves. Everybody's making money. The economy is just booming those times of the year, and they got that money, and it's a Friday night, and they're going to come to the wrestling matches, and we sell out that Civic Center every time we went there, and especially in those springtime months.
Ron, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about here today, and that is some of the things that we've been discussing on the Studcast lately, because we've been having a great time, off air and on air, because we've been investigating things, talking to people, looking into things, and it's been so much fun, from Australia to the Snake Pit to the Atlanta Wrestling Wars. We've been uncovering new things, new information, and it's been a great time. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about it, because I know many of the listeners of the Superpodcast listen to the Studcast, but I wanted them to hear a little bit about what we've been up to. So let's start actually with Australia, where we are right now. And as you just recently said on the recent episode, Ed Locke, the preeminent Australian wrestling historian, has supplied us with all the information, all the dates, all the shows you worked, information about what people thought was going on behind the scenes, what people knew was going on behind the scenes. And we've been able to take your institutional knowledge of this period of time and piece together everything else that was happening around. So let's talk a little bit about your impressions of that. And also, what has this process been like for you, going back and reliving a lot of these things, but also putting them together piece by piece?
Oh, it's been wonderful. I mean, I wish I'd have done it many, many years ago, and I'm just thankful that I got involved, and I have a story to tell, and it's a family story, and I try to do it in chronological order, and I'm just really, really enjoying it. Australia, Ed Locke sent us some tremendous information, very detailed. I mean, gosh, the guy is really, I see, I wasn't familiar with him, and I think you're the one that kind of turned me on to him because you had done a lot of things, and then you had lots of conversations, and he had helped you like he did, providing me with the Studcast information because it gives me the opportunity. I would have no idea who I wrestled in all those matches, and there's no way I could have found that if it hadn't been for Ed Locke, and I really appreciate him having sent that to me. And he sends a lot of details. He even sends, about what happens at the end of the tour that I'm on, and why is it I disappear. And, he's obviously a great wrestling historian, and I really, really appreciate his contribution to the recent Studcast about Australia.
In a lot of ways, it's maybe the most fascinating year of your career, 73, because you're in Australia. That's the year you go into St. Louis and you start becoming a regular in St. Louis. You're really starting to get built up, and you're in so many different places in the States and obviously in Australia. It's an interesting year for you.
Very interesting year for me. I'm in Madison Square Garden in that year. I'm in Philadelphia that year. I'm going a whole lot of places. I'm beginning to make a name for myself, and I'm beginning to become a star in my own right. And it's pretty gratifying for me at this point. I've worked real hard. Normally, guys don't make it to that level in 3 years. I have been wrestling a little less than 3 years when I go to Australia. I come out of Australia as a star, basically, and I change my entire persona. I change my tights. I get my first wrestling boots, maybe the first wrestling boots in the history of the sport that have color on them, and I have them made for me in Australia. It's just it's a great year for me. You're right. It's a spectacular year for me. I turned from being a neophyte and a young guy and a not so well known to becoming a potential worldwide star.
Of course, one of the other topics we've been talking about has been the Atlanta Wrestling Wars, one of the most famous incidents and series of incidents in wrestling history. Notorious. Probably the greatest example of the NWA flexing its muscle and defending a dues-paying member. And they picked the right guy because Paul Jones had been paying dues since the very, very beginning. So that's certainly someone who got their dues worth there at the end. But we've been talking about that, and there's another example of something that you had limited direct involvement in at certain points. So there were things that you knew pieces of, and we've been able to go back and research it, and you have gone above and beyond. You have gone and you've read things. You've gone and called people up who were there and talked about it. And this has really been another interesting experience. What is it like for you talking about, all these years later, people that you knew? I could talk about them very easily as people I don't know. Ann Gunkel, Ray Gunkel, Lester Welch. But you knew all of these participants. You knew them at this time. And like I said, you had limited direct involvement at different times, but at other times you had very direct involvement. You were flown in December of 1972 to help end this, to meet with Ann Gunkel because you had a good relationship with her. But once again, long-winded way of getting to a question. I apologize, Ron. All these years later, what's it like to relive Atlanta and go back and look at these things and discover new things?
It's been a tremendous experience for me, Brian. And, I got to thank you because you suggested to me at one point I was going to go to Australia before we did. And you suggested that I take a look at this time frame because it's chronological, the Studcast is, and I was involved in the Atlanta War in some respects, and that I should consider maybe doing it. And we ended up doing 3 weeks of great programs in which I just really I found out that my family's name has been besmirched, I guess is a word for it, for 40 years as being the ones that started all this. And once I started doing the research and talking to the people that were there, Bob Armstrong, a part of that crew, Roy Lee, Lester's son, who worked in that office. I knew Ann and Ray Gunkel from 1964 on. I mean, they were friends of mine and my dad and my family. I was highly involved with all of the elements of this whole story, but I'd never even read anybody's account of it until I got to researching it. And the first thing that shocked me was like, wait a minute. They're saying Lester was a nasty guy and that he did all this horrible stuff to Ann Gunkel and to Ray. And I said, that's not Lester. That's, anybody who knows Lester, he's not that type of guy. And from there, I started doing more research and I kind of changed wrestling history here. I think I presented this whole event in a light that has never been talked in this form or fashion. It's always been perceived that Lester was the heel here, and poor Ann, having lost her husband in an untimely fashion, ends up being the GOAT here, and that's not the case. And I'm very pleased that you talked me into it, because I not only was able to bring great Studcast to my fans, but I was able to kind of clear my family's name, that we're not a bunch of guys that were just out there taking over territories and running partners off and cheating them or whatever it is. It just changed everything for me.
One of the other things is, obviously you're telling the story and I'm listening to you, and the natural way of thinking would be, okay, Ron's going to say the Fuller Welch side of the story. So what I did was I went and researched everything. Everything you said, I went back and researched. Everything I saw in a book, Jody Hamilton's book, or in Jim Wilson's book, various books, various people who have done interviews. We've had interviews here on this show about the Georgia War. I went back and checked everything, and I figured the most reliable way of figuring things out is to put together a timeline of the known facts and then a timeline of the things that we're pretty sure happened, but we don't have an exact date. And that's where I was kind of blown away, because I don't know if anyone had ever done that before, because almost every version that is out there, and most of them are pro the Gunkel side, is completely historically wrong. It doesn't match up to the actual timeline of events. And I don't think I had ever stopped and put two and two together until we started working on this. But that's the really interesting thing, is that there is this whole other side of the story that's never been told.
Yeah, and it's my family. My granddad started wrestling in 1924. And kayfabe is not just a 2-word sentence to us. It has real meaning, and we don't talk much about who we are and what we've done, and in this case, it was Lester's just really being beat up here like he's just a horrible person. And it's time for us Welches to stand up, and this gave me a real opportunity. Once I researched it, I got to where I was like a little indignant about it. Now, wait a minute, this is not right, and it's time somebody said something. So I spoke up about it, and I'm glad I did. I think as time goes by here, Ryan, especially with the type of research that you're doing, there's going to be a different picture here painted about who started all this and where it came from.
Ron, before we go on that topic, you said you haven't spoken up before, and no Welches or Fullers have spoken up, and that's true. And that kind of goes into, I think, in many ways, your general philosophy, your family's general philosophy, outside of the Nashville territory, which is, whether it's wrestling newsletters now, or specifically even the wrestling magazines back in the day, you went the opposite way of courting attention. You kind of wanted to be in your own bubble and not have to have outside attention, correct?
That's right. My dad told me one time, I remember when I first started promoting in Knoxville and put together Southeastern Wrestling, he said, don't shine too bright a light. And I had to ask him, I said, well, what does that mean? And he says, if you want to have problems, he says, just let them know you're doing big business and they'll find you. So I kind of figured that out, and that made real sense. You just you keep a low profile. If your territory's doing great and your business is really good, you don't shine that big bright light because they're going to come looking for some piece of it. And it seemed to work for me, and I kind of kept that. My family's a very closed family, and they don't do much talking. They don't stand up for themselves except in the ring. Now, if there's a problem and it's going to be a shoot, or there's a problem in that area, there were stand-up guys. But otherwise, they just did their own thing and they let you kind of have your say. Well, you can say that, but that's why I really love this whole Atlanta War thing. It just really gave me an opportunity to do. You've kind of taught me that, Brian. You're such a great researcher that, you've got me into not just sitting down and doing an easy, simple show. I got to make it complicated now. I got to do the research on it. I want to dig into the dirt here and find out what this is all about. And that's kind of what happened in the Atlanta War. We've uncovered something that it's a totally different thought process now, I think, when people talk about what happened in the Atlanta War because of Studcast and because of this research.
You can hear more about the Atlanta War and so much more each week on Ron Fuller's Studcast. Search for it wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. And also don't forget the Super Studcast and the rest of the story each month. 3 additional hours of content, including guests like Jim Cornette, Kevin Sullivan, Stan Hansen, Terry Funk, the Honky Tonk Man, Robert Fuller, and so much more. Real deep dives on specific topics. You can get those shows at patreon.com/studcast or tnstud.com, only $2.99. But as we move on here with the show, let's now go to another conversation with Golden Boy Jerry Gray, and we will tell you on the other side how you can help Jerry during his battle with cancer. Let's now go to the Golden Boy, Jerry Gray. I am happy to welcome back to the Super Podcast your friend and mine, the Golden Boy, Jerry Gray. Jerry, welcome back to the show.
It's a pleasure to be back again, Ryan, as always.
Before we get going with anything else, let's get an update on your health. How are you doing? And of course, we want to let the listeners know if they want to help out. You are actively battling stage 4 cancer. You're dealing with everything that does to your finances, let alone your health, in terms of trying to be able to afford the simple things like food, electricity, your bills, everything else on top of medical bills. You can go to tinyurl.com/GoFundGoldenBoy to help Jerry out. But Jerry, how are you feeling? What's going on?
Since I just did the Star Wars thing with you, I'm still having the same symptoms again. This is something new always happening. I'm worried it might be the colon cancer back again, just the symptoms I've been getting lately. So I don't want to go into details on that, but it's, I have to have another colonoscopy as soon as I can, definitely. And then I already told you about the tooth, couple teeth falling out and all that too. So I don't know what that was from because I haven't even had chemo for a long time. So I have no idea what caused something like that. But anyway, that's the main thing is just the symptoms I'm getting now again with the stomach issues and everything, with the same thing I had when I had colon cancer before. So hopefully that's not coming back again. So.
Well, once again, tinyurl.com/GoFundGoldenBoy if you want to help Jerry out, if you enjoy Jerry here on the show. What better way to show him that you appreciate him on the show than to help him out right now when he really needs it? But, we always talk about different things, and often we talk about funny things. But I'm curious because you are such a big wrestling fan, and it seems, based on a lot of what you've talked about here on the show, you always found yourself in the room, or in many cases in the car, with the booker or whoever was in charge at that moment. I guess maybe because you were a quiet guy, or I don't know what it would be, but how come you always ended up in those positions? And tell us about some of the guys you rode with.
Yeah, it's a mystery to me, too. I guess just like you said, I was a quiet guy, not a troublemaker or anything. So one of the stories I was just thinking about that I forgot all about, making a trip and meeting Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard. He was good friends with Gary Hart, Gary Hart was in the Charlotte territory back in '83. And Grand Wizard had gone up there to just visit Gary Hart. And actually, Gary Hart rode with me a lot. So I guess another reason, again, because I'm a quiet guy and we got along good. And he told me a lot of stories and
let's be honest, and we.
Oh yeah, of course that too, and Grand Wizard like that too. I couldn't believe it. It was like, oh man, it was pretty cool. But and anyway, they were talking about like business stuff back when with the Sheik and all that, and like Gary Hart had pretty much when George Steele started, he was pretty much George Steele helped him out a lot when he first started. And George Steele even told me that he was Steele's manager when he was the student, the gimmick with the mask. But I made a trip with them going to some part of South Carolina, I believe it was, and then I actually rode up with them, but then they were going to stay over. It might have been Myrtle Beach. They were going to stay over and party. And then I rode back with Sergeant Jacques Goulet. I'll tell you one funny part of that at the end. But so on the way there, though, I got to learn a lot of old school stories because I grew up in Ohio, so I was a fan of the Sheik's promotion. So that was really a thrill because he was Abdullah Farouk up there in Michigan, the Sheik's manager, Ernie Roth was. And they were talking a lot of business right in front of me too, because again, I wasn't like. It was like kind of like silent guy that they think that, he's not even listening or he's not going to tell anyone, but it was a lot of, like payoff type things, how much money they made. I remember Gary Hart was telling how much he had made for the Starrcade 83. It was kind of like the first, not pay-per-view, closed circuit, whatever it was.
Yeah,
It
he managed Sullivan and Lewin on that show.
Yeah, and that's why Sullivan and Lewin left, because they didn't like their payoff. But
what was his payoff?
Gary, yeah, $7,000. They got a lot more than they did because he managed Kabuki though too. I remember against the Jimmy Valiant, so that was a higher match. I think Sullivan and Lewin were like on all the first matches against Scott McGee and someone, I can't remember who, but anyway, I think their payoff might have been like $1,500 or something like that. Lewin and them, I remember they got mad. They said on the small shows in Florida they make better payoffs than that. They left. They only stayed about maybe 1-2 months at the most up there. Seemed like about 1 month, really. Because the first I made trips with Sullivan, Lewin, and Gary Hart, all of us. I told you before about the car breakdown deal and all the stuff that happened that time on the side of the road, the flat tire, all 4 of us. No jack. But anyway, it was really interesting though to hear the payoffs, stuff like that, and the kind of money that Ernie Roth was talking about. The Sheik's paying for Kobo, having every 2 weeks they'd have the sellouts there. Whatever Kobo held, 10, 15,000, whatever it was, they'd sell it out every 2 weeks back in those days. And he was saying, like, payoffs just for that alone, like $1,000 for him. I don't know about other guys because he was really in tight with the Sheik, and they spoke real highly of the Sheik. And, some people said bad things, but the Sheik had his people he took care of too. So, I've heard some people say the payoffs were bad there, but most of the top guys always said it was good. And then Gary Hart, though, on the way there, I got to hear all these good stories about Jim Barnett. They talked about him a lot too, and they both, of course, did the imitation. Gary Hart did a real good imitation of Jim Barnett. And they kept, I was in the back seat, and they kept kind of like, oh, Jimsy and Ernie and Gary. I can't talk like Jim Barnett, but you've heard a million people do it, And I was thinking, what the hell's going on? Because I didn't really know stories then about Jim Barnett, the detail things, inside things. I was a young kid, So I was thinking, what the hell was going on? I was getting a little worried, like, are they going to start wrestling with me now? And then they were talking about Jim Barnett, though, a lot of funny stories and how much money they made with him. And Gary Hart was talking about Australia a lot, all the details on that. And then he started telling me other stories, though, without Ernie Roth, about when it would just be me and him in the car. He told me that I started doing it actually too, because he said that he always carried a razor blade with him, a razor he had made, not like the kind you juice your head with, but he had like a bigger one.
Yeah.
Oh man, you could do some damage with the one he had. So I always did it after he told me some of the messes he got into with people, like trying to screw with him. And he told me this, and then I heard from other people it was true. That I don't know if you ever heard about the time he cut a missing link.
Oh yeah, at the Sportatorium.
Dewey Robinson. Yeah, it really happened. He told me about it, and then I heard a lot of other people told me too about that. But he, I guess, Missing Link kept talking bad about Kerry, because Gary Hart was real close with the Von Erich kids, Kerry and all of them. And I guess Missing Link was saying something like, "Oh, does the drapes match the carpet?" I don't know what color hair it was or whatever. And Gary Hart didn't like that, and so they didn't like each other anyway for some reason, probably from back in the, the Sheik's days and the Dewey Robinson, the deal. But anyway, he juiced him and cut him, and then Dewey Robinson quit the territory, and they never came back there again. And he was a big dude, so Gary Hart, he might not look like tough guy, but he could be tough, definitely.
What part of
He was from the
83
street.
would this have been? Do you know? That you were traveling with him and the Grand Wizard?
That's the part I can't remember because I was there all of 83. I was pretty much there. And
Because obviously he dies in 83. So was he sick? Did you know of him being sick when he was visiting you?
No.
Did he say anything about Vince and what Vince was doing?
He didn't look sick at all. And when they talked about the Vince stuff, he was just, it was still then like, they didn't act like he was taking over everything. I don't know if it was kept secret even between, him and Ernie Roth or whatever. I don't know, Vince, but he was obviously starting to do it already, taking over other territories. But the territories were still doing great. A lot of them, like Charlotte and all the ones I was going to. But he didn't say a whole lot about Vince because I don't think Gary Hart ever really worked for Vince. They never talked about him at all. So they didn't. They just talked about the places they had worked together, like most of the Sheik, stuff like that. The Burt Ruby and all that. But he didn't say anything. He didn't look sick at all, and he looked, completely different because I'd never seen him without this gimmicks on. Abdul Farouk and Grand Wood. I didn't know who it was at first either. When Gary Hart went to meet me, it was like he had this guy with him. I was like, "What the hell was that?" He was a real nice guy though too. And he talked about his favorite guy to manage, and I still can't remember. He said Bobby Orton I think it's Greg Valentine. Did he manage Greg Valentine?
Yeah, he did.
Ernie Roth?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what he said his favorite was. I think that was his favorite, his number one guy. And then he said Orton was there too, number two. Yeah, they were just talking about that guy. Gary Hart really talked a lot more about business stuff to me though, because that was only one trip with a few hours with Ernie Roth. Because then on the way home, like I said, they stayed over in Myrtle Beach, and I just got a ride back with Jacques Goulet, Rene Goulet, or whatever.
What happened there? You said you had a funny story about that.
Yeah, okay, this is really funny because Gary Hart, I asked him for a joint for on the way back, and so he gave me a joint, and then Rene Goulet was really picky about his car. It was either a Lincoln or a Cadillac, but he didn't like nobody to even eat nothing in his car. He was really picky. He didn't want you to smoke nothing. So I'm riding. It was just me and him too. So I'm riding back with him back to Charlotte, and I had that joint. And he goes, "No, the way he talks, I can't talk that that Montreal accent." He goes, "No, not in my car." And I said, "Oh, come on, I'll have the window open, I'll just." And then I don't know if Gary Hart put like 20, those cigarette load things that blow up, because he knew that Rene Goulet hated that, any kind of ashes or anything in his car. So I don't know what the hell he put in that thing, but it was like the 4th of July going off when I lit it. All over his car, popping everywhere, fire shooting everywhere. I do not know. I never did find out what. I never even asked him because I didn't even sell it. You don't sell ribs. And he just kind of looked at me the next day waiting for me to say, "What the hell did you put in that joint?" No, I didn't even sell it though, but Rene Goulet was so damn pissed. What the hell? It lasted forever too. I couldn't get rid of the thing. I didn't get to smoke it even because the whole thing just blew to pieces everywhere. The funniest part was because he hated anybody to even have one thing in his car, ash or anything. And the whole thing is just blowing up everywhere, burning his car all over the place, shooting there. You know how them cigarette loads were. He must have put like 5 of them in there at least, maybe more. I don't know what the hell was wrong with that thing. It was the funniest thing. But that was just pretty funny. Rip he got on me. I didn't get no joint either. I was just blew the joint to pieces, whatever it was. Anyway, yeah, that was one story with Gary Hart, though. And then I made so many trips with him, though. And then I remember Kabuki, too, would ride with us a lot. Him and what was the one that got killed in the plane crash? Magic Dragon Sonata. Professor Sonata, he was. And he was Magic Dragon in Charlotte with the mask. Yeah. They both rode with me and Gary Hart a lot. And, of course, they didn't smoke or anything, so me and Gary would be together mostly. And they'd be in the front seat drinking beer. And then I remember, I think Garrett was kind of like Paul Ellering, almost like his real manager type thing with the money and everything. Because I just remember him one time getting in an argument about when they were going to Atlanta to do the Omni from Charlotte. And Kabuki kept saying he wants to know what the money is exactly from now on instead of Gary doing all the business, I was like, Jesus, I don't want to hear this conversation, I don't think. And then Gary just kept saying, I got it. Don't worry. Because he didn't speak real great English, Kabuki. But that was kind of a weird conversation they were having. So I don't know if he was getting like the whole payoff and then Kabuki wasn't happy with what he was giving him or what, But he was really, a lot of information. And like most guys didn't tell what they got paid for Starcade. He told me everybody's payoff, actually. He told me Harley Race got, I think, $25,000 to drop the belt. He got $7,000. He was telling me everybody's payoff. I remember he got one of the high payoffs. I think Piper got $7,000, or than him and Valentine, for that dog collar match.
Wait, hold on. They got $7,000 and Gary Hart got $7,000?
Yeah, because Gary Hart, like I said, he was pretty big in the office with it, and he was like, he managed a bunch of different guys too. Who else did he manage? I can't even remember. Kabuki, though, and that big angle. And then maybe they got 10. I remember they were happy with the payoffs, but a lot of the guys that already made big money before weren't happy. Like, I don't think Valentine and all of them were too happy, because I'm sure he made, up in WWF, some of those big Shea stadiums and all that. I'm sure they made more than that, or at least that. But, yeah, he said, I think it was 10 was the most I know the Piper and Valentine got, because I know Race got the most, Harley Race, just for dropping the belt and everything, too. But yeah, $7,000. I remember Gary kept saying he acted like it wasn't that great either. They were kind of complaining about it, how the boys are, even though, because he said, how much did Crockett make though? Because it was so, so many they had it like all the theaters everywhere, the closed circuit. This is how weird it was. It was like they made, I was on the show, but not wrestling. All the, like me, Gary Royal, remember him from ICW? Gary Royal, he was there. All the guys that were like underneath, we were got paid to be on the show. Magic Dragon, because I remember each guy, Kelly Kandinsky, all of us, we still got paid to be on the show. I think I got like $500 or whatever just to be there. And what our job was, to take the whatever it was back then, 3/4 inch, whatever it was, a copy of the Starcade.
Tapes. Yeah.
Each guy had to take it to whatever location, wherever the theaters were. So we had to take it. I can't even remember. It was snowing real bad too that night. But we had to drive. Me and Magic Dragon had to drive to somewhere, wherever it was, to drop it off to some other place. Steve, and each guy was assigned each 2 guy, underneath guy, and that's what we had to do, our job for that. It was weird. It was like, so this guy had to take it to, say, Myrtle Beach. These 2 had to take it to Savannah, these 2. So that's how Crockett did it. I was like, what the hell? That's kind of weird.
So you didn't get to go to the after party?
No. I didn't even know there was an after party. There was, but I didn't even know. Well, of course, then I got to tell them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Of course, then I got to tell. I was like, I'm really, I get them damn tapes and do it. You guys ain't coming here. I remember Toronto, they always had an after party there, the Jack Tunney and them, after the Maple Leaf Garden. So I was on that show a couple times. That was a good payoffs, too. They paid real good for back in those days on me. Yeah, the Jack Tunney, he told me a couple of times good advice for because I was a heel, in Toronto, and there was a lot of nice looking girls, groupies, arena rats, whatever you want to call them, and I was out there talking to them, and he told me, if you're gonna talk to the girls, don't do it in front of so the fans can see you, because you're a heel. It's gonna kill your heat to see you're a nice guy talking to the young girls and being nice. And then I was like, oh, okay. I get it, But I rode with him a few. I think he was actually jealous, but I found out later, I think that was his rat I was talking to.
Did you get to go to any of those parties where you hear about Flair just going crazy?
That was one of them at that place. The hotel, whatever it was we stayed at, it was right next to the Maple Leaf Gardens. I can't even remember now. Weston or something. Yeah, up there they had a whole suite they'd have rented out, and they would do it up there. But I never wanted I always left usually before Flair started doing all that crap, because, I didn't want to be, I don't know. I heard everything, but I've seen him a couple times. Funniest story I have about Flair is, I think it was one of my first weeks in Charlotte. I'm in the parking lot. I told you about that. When I first got to Charlotte, I was used to Eddie Graham, where he didn't give a crap what you wore. Flip-flops, shorts, whatever, when you come in the Sportatorium office, So I walk in Jim Crockett's office with I had sandals on, probably shorts, everything, the worst way you could dress for Jim Crockett. And I walk in there like that, and then Dory Funk's the booker, and he sees me and goes, "Did Crockett see you?" He said, "Go back out and go change and come back in." Oh my God, no, get out of here quick. So I got out, and I thought, okay, I'll put pants on with my sandal. That's better. Some jeans or whatever. I walk back in, and he goes, "Oh God, no, he'll just go call me from a phone booth. Jesus, don't let Crockett see you like this." And I was like, what an asshole. But anyway, then I think it was that same day, I'm out in the parking lot getting ready to go, and then Dory says, hold on. And Flair needed us to push start his Corvette. It kept breaking down in the parking lot, and he goes, I'm going to kill Mike Graham, because Mike Graham had a Corvette shop in Tampa. He sold him that Corvette. I was like, oh my gosh, that was my first impressions of Flair. Kind of. I was like, okay, guys, push now. And they got finally started, and I was like, what the hell? This guy's the world champion? No. But anyway, it was pretty funny. He was bitching about Mike Graham ripping him off, and then, I never stayed at too many parties with Flair, because I knew what was going to happen. I didn't want to see him naked, whatever he did usually with that robe and everything. But, Gary Hart, though, he was a really nice guy. I mean, people say that book and everything, most of the stories in there, everybody says they exaggerated, but I don't know. I've seen a lot of the stuff. He didn't take nothing from nobody. I know that.
There you hear it, the Golden Boy, Jerry Gray. And once again, we want to remind you that if you enjoy Jerry here on this show and want to help him out as he currently battles stage 4 cancer, which has depleted him of all of his funds, all of the money he had saved up throughout the years of wrestling. If you want to help him out, tinyurl.com/GoFundGoldenBoy. All of that money goes directly to Jerry. So if you enjoy him on the show, every dollar helps. Help him out. tinyurl.com/GoFundGoldenBoy. And before we move on, let me say hello to Bix. Bix, how's it going?
Why am I here?
As we move on here with the show, that really is him. That's not a sound effect. As we move on now with the show, let's now go to the return of Front Row Section D, a very popular segment here on the show, where John Hitchock, longtime front row denizen in Greensboro, North Carolina, talks about his stories of all the chaos and trouble he caused at ringside, but also, as he will hear this week, talks about his memories of Mid-Atlantic wrestling. And today, John's going to look at the top 5 tag teams he ever saw in his life, his 5 favorite tag teams. And I want to also point out something else here at the beginning. I got so wrapped up in my intro for John that I introduced him as being from Charlotte, North Carolina. Obviously, he's from Greensboro. I want to apologize to the people of Greensboro for ever mistaking them for being from Charlotte. But with that said, let's now go. Any final words, Bix?
No, not really.
Let's now go to this conversation I had, Front Row Section D, with John Hitchock. It is time for the return of one of our most popular segments here on the Super Podcast, Front Row Section D. And of course, that means the leader of Front Row Section D is here from parts unknown in Charlotte, North Carolina, John Hitchock, back on the show.
Greensboro.
Oh, excuse me. I apologize right there. I went right to Charlotte. Greensboro, I should have said. Greensboro is usually when people talk about Mid-Atlantic, they talk about Charlotte because of the office there, but Greensboro really is the city, correct?
It's the capital of the Mid-Atlantic, and it was just because we had the biggest building. In the 60s, there was 9,000 seats, and in the 70s, they put a roof on. They put an upper deck on it and went to 15,005, and then they increased it again to over 20,000. So, yeah, Greensboro, every big show, Starrcade, you name it, almost every big feud, everything would wrap up in Greensboro because they could just sell more tickets.
You know, the way they used to look at the Garden and say, for New York, how the Garden goes, the rest of the business goes. That was Vince McMahon Sr.'s way of thinking, and for a long time, Vince McMahon Jr.'s. You can kind of say the same thing about Greensboro. How Mid-Atlantic Wrestling and Crockett Promotions went, Greensboro went. And really, the fall of Crockett Promotions can be seen by looking directly at Greensboro, taking Starrcade out of Greensboro, and a lot of bad decisions, moving Greensboro Wrestling to a different night.
They did something else that was really stupid, is they started doing TV tapings in Greensboro. And they would sometimes do them, like they do like 3 or 4 shows, and then they come back 2 weeks later and then do 3 or 4 more shows. And they just wore the town out. I mean, it wasn't just once a month. It was twice a month. And then it was a terminal thing where you're sitting there watching these jobber matches, over and over and over. And you could see the crowd beginning to get upset over that they were basically being treated like movie props. You're the background, and you could see it happening. There was one night, Flair, it was main event, Flair's in the ring, and Flair, the great Ric Flair, and he's in the ring, and he looks out in the crowd, and there's only about 8,000 people there, which normally there'd be easy 12,000. And he broke character, and he looked at me, and he went, "Where is everybody?" And I went, "Dusty's booking sucks." And he went, "Yeah, I know." And he kind of looked down. And he goes, "Man, this is terrible." And I went, yeah. I said, well, it is what it is. He shook his head and went right back into Ric Flair. That's the only time that guy ever broke character, because it was kind of an assault on his, on his deal, because he was the Nature Boy. He sold out everything. He was the greatest, So, and people make a big deal, say, oh, that Starcade stuff, that's a bunch of bullshit. No. I'm telling you, people were dedicated to that shit. People love that shit. People went to that thing. They supported that thing. That was our thing. That was Greensboro's crown jewel, was the Starcade. And when they took that shit, they put half of it in Atlanta. The crowd fell to about maybe 9,000 people, maybe, and we're watching the main events on a TV screen. And then when they put it in Chicago, that was the end of it, because the fans just said, fuck it. And I swear to God, it was in unison. So many people just said, we don't want to do this anymore. We're not being respected. We started it. This is our deal. And they totally screwed it over. So, but there's a lot of things that were wrong with it. But I did have a list. I did have a list for you today. Did have you a list. People like lists. Okay. So people are saying, okay, John, you've been watching wrestling for 50 years. You've seen everybody, So, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you. First time ever, John's going to do a list on the top 5 tag teams of all time.
Now, these aren't just tag teams you've seen live. These are tag teams you've seen on TV as well?
All of them are live except one.
Okay.
Okay. Now, my number 1 is kind of a cheat, because it could be number 1 or it could be number 2. It's like 1A and 1A for me. But the greatest tag team I ever saw was Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. Those two guys had a chemistry that I was basically second to none. And they were the perfect pairing. They could talk and they could wrestle their ass off. And one of the great strengths of heels is making the other guys look good. And both those guys could do anything. I mean, they were, I think Tully was a better wrestler than Arn, but Arn had charisma and the interviews, and Tully, I'll talk about him later, but, I think Tully Blanchard's one of the greatest heels that ever walked the earth. But those two guys, the timing they had was incredible. And I'm going to tell you a story. We were sitting front row Greensboro on Section D, and it was a match. I think it was the Rock and Roll Express versus Tully and Arn. And, of course, J.J. Dillon at ringside. And Arn took a like a side slam or something and went down. And Tully was standing on the ring floor. Okay? And Tommy Young jumps in, and JJ standing next to Tully, and they have their back turned to the ring, and they're probably about 7 or 8 feet away from the ring. And Tommy Young jumps in, 1, 2, and when he hits 2, JJ goes, now. Tully Blanchard turns around, jumps up on the ring, dives through the ropes head first, and breaks the count before Tommy Young can go 3. Now think about this. 1, 2, 3. Tully Blanchard went with his back turned to the ring, turned around, jumped up on the ring apron, dove through the ropes head first with a double axe handle, and hit Ricky Morton in the back and stopped the count. Arn was not going to kick out. And I sat there, and when that happened, I was like, we're up there cheering and raising hell and everything. I fell back in my chair. I went, Jesus Christ, did you just see what he did? You see how much time it took for him to do that? I mean, did you see the athleticism and the speed and how assured he was? I mean, those guys that were second generation guys like Blanchard, Ricky Morton, there were some of those guys, they knew that ring like, your living room. You know what I mean? I mean, it's incredible. And I asked Tully about it. I said, no, that had to be a bet, right? And he just started laughing. He said, it must have been. He said, I don't remember doing that. He said, but there's a lot of things I don't remember. But he said, but I said, I couldn't believe it. It was one of those things, it's like, holy shit. And it was like, and you could see that some people got it, but the people that did, I mean, it just took my breath away. The athleticism, and if you grow up and put up the rings when you're a kid and all that stuff, man, I mean, the magic those two guys had was incredible. Incredible. I mean, and they were good as the Brain Busters in WWE. I mean, they were good, but there was nothing like them when they were when they were with Crockett. I mean, that stuff was incredible. Anyway,
well, let me ask you this though, John. Tully was one of the few highlights of 1984 in Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, and of course Arn would arrive shortly after that. Did you instantly appreciate them when they first arrived?
I thought the way they brought Tully in with the, the perfect 10 and all that was a perfect heelish way to bring him in. And Tully Blanchard, he looks like a heel. He looks like a snotty, condescending bad guy. With the way, with his turned up nose and his, and the way, and he just had a look about him that made you go, what a cocky guy. I mean, what a jerk, Arn was my favorite wrestler. He's still my favorite wrestler. But when they brought Arn in and they did that great interview with Ole watching Arn on Georgia, remember that? And he kept saying, "There's something about this kid. There's something about this kid." And then they announced that he was like Ole's cousin or something, and then they brought him in. I always thought that was genius in a way because, let's face it, Ole was near the end of his run, and he needed a young guy in there to take all the big bumps and to do all the wrestling stuff and set him up for his spots, But the thing about Arn Anderson that was incredible for me was Arn would he'd be up there with the Horsemen or with just whoever or with Ole, and Ole would go, and I still think Ole's maybe the greatest talker ever. Because Ole was so simplistic with what he said. It was just wonderful. But Arn would only have sometimes 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and he would always steal the whole interview with one line. He'd say stuff like, I don't want to blow my own horn, but toot, toot. Now, when he did that, whenever he came to Greensboro, the whole front row would be going, toot, 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 toot. He would go crazy. He'd say, yeah, that's my boys. But no, you recognize talent. And those two guys, every once in a while, it's like the perfect fit. It's just the perfect timing, the perfect fit. And, it was devastating when those guys left to go to WWE. That was basically, in my opinion, the end of the Horsemen as far as we were concerned. It never could capture the magic of the Lightning because those two guys were the Horsemen. I mean, they were it. And anyway, I could go on and on about those guys.
You said they are number one on your list. I'm going to have to assume, you being from the Mid-Atlantic, number two will be George Becker and Johnny Weaver, correct?
No. Johnny Weaver was a great babyface in his day, and George Becker had a brother, well, quote unquote brother, Bobby Becker, and Bobby Becker died in the ring. He died of cancer, took a slam, and never got up. But no, we're talking about guys that were geniuses. And I don't think Johnny Weaver and George Becker would, there's going to be some old guy at a wrestling reunion thing walk up to me like he did one time. He goes, "There's that son of a bitch that made fun of Johnny Weaver. God damn it." Like, calm down, old man. Sign the papers, Anyway, the second team, which could be the first team, it just depends on what matches I'm watching. Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton, and Stan Lane, of course, with Jimmy Cornette. Now, some people are going to immediately say, "Wait a minute, Bobby, okay, but Stan, I mean, come on, what about Dennis?" I said, look, I think Dennis Condrey was really, really talented guy. And was he probably a better overall wrestler than Stan Lane? Okay, I'll give you that. But there was a magic that happened when Bobby and Stan got together, because I think Bobby Eaton is one of the unsung geniuses in the history of wrestling, because Bobby could do anything, and I mean, except talk. I mean, he could do anything. But Stan brought a sex appeal and a charisma and that great booming voice when he would do the introductions. And Bobby knew, what Stan's limitations were. And there wasn't, in my opinion, there wasn't a ton of them, but they would set him up for his spots. And those two guys, of course, with Jimmy, you already got a lightning rod outside for heat. Those two guys, that one night in Greensboro, Tully and Arn wrestled Bobby and Stan. And JJ and Jimmy were there. And I've never, and I sent it to the Wrestling Observer. I said, I just saw my first 6-star match. I've never seen anything like it. They were on, it was like watching the perfect machine in action. It was so good. That match was so terrific that I called all my friends and said, you got to go back next time and see this shit. These guys are incredible. I mean, it's just incredible. And then my friends showed up and they had left. And I was like, oh, fuck, so. But, Bobby Eaton, I've say this to everybody when we're sitting there talking about wrestling. We used to go sit on the front row, and Bobby Eaton would do something in the ring that we'd never seen before. And we would stop and look at each other and go, have you ever seen that? And, Big Eddie or Owen or Bruce or Casey or somebody go, nope, never seen that before. He did a spot once where he took a punch. It was probably against a Fantastic or something, but he took a punch. He fell back, hit the second rope, bounced up, took another punch, fell back through the second rope, the other side of the ring, came back, took a shot, and then jumped over the top rope onto the floor, and it was all in perfect motion. There was no hesitation. There was no setup. There was no pause waiting for the guy to be in the right place. I mean, it was incredible. It's like ballet or something. And it's so athletic, and it's dangerous as shit. And he did it just as smooth as silk. We're just like, God, man, Bobby Eaton. I think he's never been truly appreciated. And also Stan Lane had one of the nicest mothers you ever met. You know, she would go to the matches, and fans would be booing the shit out of him, and she'd be waving, "Hey, Stan!" and Stan would be waving to his mother and shit. We gave her mother some flowers once. Being totally honest, we bought the flowers for Missy Hyatt, and she didn't show up, so we went and gave them to Stan's mother, and it just made her day. So that was pretty cool. But when those guys, that one night in Greensboro, when that team hooked up, and that was rare for Greensboro because that was Flair country, and we always got Flair for the main event. But for some reason, they decided to have Tully and Arn versus Bobby and Stan. And I tell you, that was incredible. It never got recorded. It was just a house show, but it was just one of those things. You're like, you know, the magic was there. I mean, it really was. I mean, you can't underestimate, you know, Cornette's power, you know, with his gift for gab. One night we made posters that said, Jim Cornette, the Gauguin of gab, Bobby Eaton, the Rembrandt of wrestling, and Stan Lane, the Picasso of pugilism. and those guys, we just held it up, and those guys went nuts. And they said that for the whole rest of the tour, that's how Jimmy introduced the team, which I thought was awesome. But no, there's so many nights. I once saw that tag team that had Bubba Rogers there in a high school gym. A local high school had them, and they tore the house down with only 400 or 500 people there. I mean, it's nice to see people that love what they do, and they always put out. I mean, they were just incredible.
That's one of the big shames that Crockett Promotions, as they sold to Turner right before it happens, Tully and Arn jump, and that, beyond them just leaving, it kills the program with the Midnight Express. Who knows where that would have gone?
God, they showed that one little lame clip. Was it from Philadelphia or something where the titles changed, and I thought that was kind of cheesy. I mean, it was kind of a shame they couldn't have, passed the torch kind of thing with Tully and Arn, but they never should have let them go anyway. But that's the way it goes. Third team, no doubt about it, Ole Anderson and Gene Anderson. Those guys, in a way, the Assassins should probably be mentioned here because the Assassins, the way they wrestled here, they wrestled as the Bolos.
Right.
The Great Bolo and Bolo, which is the way they used to do it, had some of the same characteristics, but the Andersons took it to a different level just because of the mouth on Ole Anderson. There was something wonderful about Ole and Gene Anderson, where they would just say, we're the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. We're the best wrestlers in the world. It says wrestling on the marquee. And if you want to give us a try, why don't you get in the ring and try it? And I got really fortunate to talk to Ole Anderson at one of the last Fan Fest things they had in Charlotte, and got about 15, 20 minutes with him. And I was asking him about Gene, and everything. And he said, when we would have our matches on television, we would go up to the two guys we were going to wrestle. And Ole said he would tell them, your job is to make the tag. That's your job. And if you make the tag, it's not your fault. It's our fault, because our job is to make sure you don't make the tag. So you try with every ounce of energy you have to make that tag, and we will block you and we will stop you. And then we're going to submit you. And think about that, that they had such confidence in their wrestling ability that these young lions, and that's always a rule of wrestling, isn't it? If they're young lions, they're going to lose. If they're wily veterans, they're going to lose. That's just the way it is. If the announcer said that was like written in stone. That, and any wrestler whose finish and hold is the bear hug, they suck. Okay, if the only move that you can come up with for a finisher is the bear hug, you suck. John Studd, you suck. There's a couple of them that are like that. Anyway, so Ole would just say to the audience, this is what the deal is. And those guys would try to make the tag, and they did that, the famous, they other guys would scoop up Gene, and he'd do the blind tag to Ole, and then Ole would come in, and they'd do the block, and they'd grab the leg, and they'd do all that. If you watched wrestling back in the 70s, especially in the middle 70s and late 70s, you could watch an Anderson match, and you could understand it in about one match. They were going to cut the ring in half, and they were going to get you in their corner, and they were going to beat your ass. And then they were going to beat you down so bad that when, that they would have you to the point where Gene would hold them, Ole off the top rope, knee into the shoulder, bang, grab the arm, 1, 2, 3, the guy would give up, screaming bloody murder. Very simple. But see, that's part of what's wrong with wrestling now. Not that I want to go on a tirade about that. Is you could watch wrestling back then, and in one show, who's good, who's bad, what the deal is, who hates who, it's on. You could turn on the next show and find it. You can't do that now. But they would do that. And I tell you, buddy, I went to those matches in Greensboro, and when I was there for Johnny Weaver and Haystack Calhoun versus Ole and Gene Anderson. And when they grabbed Johnny Weaver and they threw his ass in the corner, the Greensboro Coliseum went crazy because everybody had seen it for a month. Grab the guy, cut the ring off, throw him in the corner, whip their ass, and just pound on them. And the crowd would start chanting, and the crowd would go crazy. And sometimes in the first they throw Weaver in there, he'd get out, and the crowd would go, ooh, that's good. He got out. But eventually, you knew Ole and Gene was going to grab him, put him in that corner, work their ass over, and the crowd would go crazy. You got to make the tag. I mean, everybody was so into it. And then when he finally did get that tag, and he tagged in Haystack Calhoun, who was no great shakes, okay? I think he used a bear hug. Anyway, he'd run into the ring, and he'd start knocking them down. And I swear this was the funniest thing I ever saw. And then they hit him low, and he went down. They grabbed him and threw him in the corner, and the Coliseum almost fell down because they're like, holy shit, they got Haystack in there. They're going to work his ass up. And I think the match I went to, they went time limit, but an hour. But it was such a great psychology of it, of those guys and the way they did it. And then Gene Anderson had that neck twitch where he'd look at the camera and switch his head, which was a real thing. Somebody should have had surgery on Gene and helped him out, but let's just don't go there. But it made him so menacing looking. You know what I mean? And then later he became a manager, and he had a really gravelly voice, and he did a good job as a manager. I mean, I'm not going to say anything bad about that guy because he really was one of the legitimate tough guys in the Mid-Atlantic history. But those two guys together, they dominated tag team wrestling in the Mid-Atlantic so cleanly. And the matches they had with Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat and Paul Jones and Wahoo McDaniel are legendary around here.
What about when they turned face against Flair and Valentine?
The crowd went face. The crowd went face with that. I don't think they did. I think everybody. I remember that. I was at that match, and I think everybody wanted to see Ole and Gene shut the young punks up. Quite frankly, I mean that's funny because I'm a young guy and I should have been with the young guys, right? But I kept thinking Ole and Gene are going to kill these guys. They're going to grab Greg Valentine. They're going to throw him in the corner and they're going to whip his ass, and that's going to be the end of it. But they picked Gene. The thing ended up on on the floor, and they picked Gene up on their shoulders and they ran him into the pole. They poled him on his shoulder, and he went down, and then they won the match. That's how they won it. And when they won it, the crowd went crazy because nobody saw it coming. Nobody thought that Ole and Gene, the Andersons, could lose to these young Spitfires. And then the legend is that Gene had to go in for surgery on his shoulder or something. So that's why that went the way it went. So you can't underestimate how the genius of the way that promotion was run with Ole and Gene, because that stuff just made so much sense. And the psychology was just fabulous because, like I said, anybody, a kid in grade school, a guy with a PhD, you can understand it in a minute exactly what was going on. Okay, well, here's number 4.
Okay.
Bob Roop and Cowboy Bob Orton Jr.
Really? What a surprising pick.
I never saw those guys in person as a tag, but I was addicted to Florida. I was so addicted to Florida that a friend of mine's family left to go out of town, and we broke in his house so we could watch Florida. We jimmied the window and climbed in and sat in his living room, watched Florida, then we ran out.
Did you ever tell him?
Yeah, I saw him a couple of weeks ago. It's fessed up. Anyway, something was wrong with our cable. We had to see it. I mean, come on, let's get realistic here. It's wrestling. So Bob Roop and Bob Orton Jr. were so good in Florida that they were creating an alphabet on how to be heels. And Roop is one of the all-time great heels. But when he first came in Florida, he was the American back jump. I mean, the All-American, the All-American Bob Roop. And then when he turned on Jose Lothario. which was one of the funniest things I ever saw because I worked my older brother and he got mad and stormed out of the damn place. But anyway, and then he became the All-American back jumper. And Bob Roop was great on the mic. I mean, nefariously great, you know, like schemingly great. And I think it's been kind of forgotten, but Bob Orton Jr., I swear to God, he's the first guy I ever saw jump off the second rope. He's the first guy I saw flying around the ring the way he was doing. I mean, he was a phenomenal athletic talent. And Roop was, you know, the conniving general type guy. And they did one of my favorite angles of all time is they had, you know, Bob Roop, heel, Cowboy Bob, he wasn't Cowboy then, he was just Bob Orton Jr. And they brought in Bob Orton Sr., the Big O, right? Did you ever remember seeing that guy? You know, he was a guy with a flat top. He kind of looked like your father who had gone through World War II.
Yeah.
You know, really tough looking guy. And they did this thing down in Florida where Roop and Orton Jr. are cheating like shit. And then, you know, they'd win the matches. And then Bob Orton Sr. suddenly appeared and started, you know, tagging with them, you know, hanging with them. And Soley, who was, you know, just incredible, Soley would just go, well, you know, what do you think about this? What do you think about this, you know, your son being up with an American back jumper, you know, Bob Roop? And he goes, well, I don't know, Gordon. You know, his father was really kind of open about it. And then they do an interview talking about how they were going to stomp somebody, and he'd roll his eyes and kind of, they'd walk off, and, you know, Senior would kind of look at him like, damn, you know, I don't know about that. So you kind of figured what was going to happen was the father was going to grab the young stud bolt, Orton, and jerk his ass up and say, you got to straighten up and fly right, son. And then, you know, leave Bob Roop. Well, guess what? We're sitting there watching the show, and this thing went on for about a month or so. And then the weirdest thing happened. It got down to the nitty-gritty in a six-man tag, and suddenly Bob Orton Sr. turned heel and joined them. And you didn't see it in a million years because, like I said, he looked like he came out of Leave It to Beaver. I mean, he's like flat top, straight edge, tough guy. But he goes ahead and he joins them and starts cheating. And nobody saw it, and I didn't see it. And I was like, oh, that's genius. That's brilliant. And I was talking to Roop once. I mean, he's a really nice guy. I was talking to Bob Roop, and he said, you know what we used to do? We used to leave the arena. You know, Orton Jr. and I used to leave the arena, and then Orton Sr. would drive by himself, and then we'd meet outside, you know, like at the next, you know, 7-Eleven or something, and then Cowboy Bob would jump in the car and with the senior, and they'd go home. He said, but they would work it that far where they would try to make sure that everybody knew there was a conflict between the father and the son. And then when he turned heel, I mean, the roof went. And that was one of the hottest feuds I ever remember. But, you know, Bob Roop he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And I think, you know, when he became that, Maya Singh, when he was with Sullivan, and, you know, he kind of got lost there as far as just the pure quality of him being a super wrestler. And, you know, then he didn't do interviews anymore. He just kind of barked and stuff. So he kind of took some of the edge off of him. I think that was a mistake. But, you know, you do what you got to do to keep making money, right? You're making a living. So that tag team has been forgotten because I don't think anybody has any of the tapes. But if it ever comes around, anybody ever can see some of that stuff, you cannot believe the athleticism of those two guys. And Orton Jr. was just, the guy was liquid. I mean, he was terrific wrestler.
What'd you think of Orton Jr. and Dick Slater in the Mid-Atlantic?
Oh, they were good. They were real good. I always liked Dick Slater because I thought Dick Slater was kind of funny. Dick Slater once, I told Dick Slater this once. He did an interview down in Florida. That's funny as shit. He walks up to Soley and he's wearing his street clothes, and they announce that he's going to have a match. And he walks up to Soley and he goes, you know, Gordon, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't wrestle. I've had a conscience problem, and I decided I just can't do it. And I've just decided that that's it. I'm going to retire. I'm going to give up the Florida title, and I'm just going to leave, and that's it. And I just wanted to tell you and thank you for being a good supporter. And, you know, we may not agree, but just want to shake your hand. I'm going to go off the ring and basically give the belt to this guy in the ring, and that's it. And he's like, okay, well, that's kind of, that's kind of weird. And so Slater walks up there and he makes the announcement, grabs the house mic. He's retiring. That's it. He don't want to do anymore. And he gets ready to hang the belt to the guy, and he looks at the belt and he goes, nah, fuck it. And he just beats the shit out of the guy. Then grabs the belt and goes down to Gordon. He goes, guess what, Gordon? I changed my mind. And he just walks off. I mean, they used to do stuff like that was really, really fun. There's a lot of guys that you could talk about in tag teams. I mean, you know, when Snuka, didn't down in Georgia snuck a tag with
Terry Gordy.
I mean, that's a scary damn team. But I'm kind of talking about more teams that were together for a long time instead of just put together for short periods. And ladies and gentlemen, my 5th tag team of all time, Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen.
Ah, did you get to see them live?
I saw them live, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
They came to Greensboro, North Carolina, one time, unadvertised. And we're sitting there, front row, and out comes Dory Funk Jr. and Tim Horner. And we're like, well, damn, Dory Funk Jr. is like a legend, you know?
The Charisma Express.
Don't dump on Dory. Dory's one of the great wrestlers of ever lived.
No, he is.
You know, he was better when he was with his father, because his father would always lay the line that, you know, he's and Soley would always call him, you know, the chess master. He was always one step ahead of everybody. Take 2 punches to get his punch in, that kind of stuff. I mean, human chess. Gordon, you know, that's Gordon always laid that on him. But we're sitting there, and see, the thing is, I mean, everybody knew Dory Funk Jr., world champion, one of the greatest wrestlers ever walked the planet. And Tim Horner had just come up from Georgia, and he had pinned Hawk on a Georgia television show. And nobody pinned a Road Warrior, right? But he did a roll-up and pinned him and then ran away. So we figured Tim Horner, White Lightning, who we nicknamed Not Frightening, was really going to be something. This was going to be the young stud guy that's going to come Mid-Atlantic and be a star. Well, out come Brody and Hansen, and we're like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Because we had seen a couple of tapes, you know, thanks to the glory of VHS. We had seen a couple of those matches in Japan, and we knew, and we already knew about Hansen, but, you know, that's the first time we'd actually, and Brody was in Georgia for a while as a single, and he was scary and terrific. And then, of course, he was in Texas, remember, when he was always in the middle of the mix with the Von Erich group. So they come walking out, and I'm with our crew's like speechless. Holy shit, Hansen and Brody, what they do? They must have had a week off between Japan. They're picking up a date. I heard they went to Charlotte too, so they actually did wrestle in Charlotte. And so they go into the ring, you know, here's Brody, you know, barking, and we're like, God almighty. And Hansen's, you know, thick as shit, and we're like, look at these guys. Started the match off. It was like Hansen and Dory Funk Jr. And you could tell that there's history between those guys from Japan and probably in Texas too. But, you know, they kind of wore down Dory Funk Jr. They kind of beat him up, you know, and wore him down with some tags. And I'm not kidding. This is the true story. Cornette will love this. Dory Funk Jr. goes and falls into the corner, makes the tag. And Tim Horner is on the ring apron holding the top rope. And he freezes. He totally freezes.
What do you mean?
He doesn't climb through the ropes. He's got the top ropes and he's frozen. And Brody looks at him and goes like, arf, arf, and reaches over and grabs him by the top of his hair and pulls him over the top rope by his hair and then proceeds to beat the shit out of him. I mean, give him nothing. Just, you know, and then he tags in Stan's. You know how Stan used to do that elbow where he dropped to one knee and dropped those elbows on you? And he started whipping on him. And back then, the Coliseum security was a couple of tires with concrete and a post and a rope. That was what would hold back the crowd. And so you could do anything you wanted to if you want. It was really pretty pitiful. No steel railings or anything. And so they are filleting Horner and giving him nothing. And they did the thing where Brody threw him off the ropes, the big boot, knocks the shit out of him, tags Stan. Stan gets in the ring, Texas, throws him off the top, throws him off the rope, hits him with that clothesline, schwang. I mean, the guy does a 360, 480, I don't know. And then he just pins him. 1, 2, 3, clean, no playing, no nothing. And so Hansen rolls out of the ring. And then Dory Funk Jr. jumps in the ring and starts swinging on Brody, right? Because, you know, he wants to prove he's tough, and he is. So, you know, he starts pounding on him. So Hansen turns around and starts walking out of the ring, and he's going down the walkway. And once you get past that rope, you're in the crowd, right? So I went up to, I swear to God, I'm such a stupid ass. I walked up to Stan Hansen, the great Stan Hansen, and I went, Stan, Bruiser needs some help. You know, Funk Jr.'s jumped in the ring. Bruiser needs some help. And Hansen turns around, and he's standing right beside me. He turns around and he looks. And there's an image that will live forever in my memory. There's Dory Funk Jr. laid down, Tim Horner laid on top. There's Bruiser Brody with a chair in his hand. Where he got it, I don't know. And he's barking like a dog, and he's shit out of these guys. He's going, arf, bam, bam, arf, bam, bam, licking his hand, bam. And then Stan Hansen turned and looked at me and he goes, oh, Bruiser don't need no help. And he just kept on walking to the back. And I'm like, holy shit, when are these guys coming back? Nah, that was it for us. That's the only time we got to see them. And it was the only, I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting. It was a triangle of destruction. There's Brody at the top of the triangle, and these two guys filleted out, and he is cheering the shit out of them. And then he finally leaves. And when he's walking out, I realize I'm as tall as Stan Hansen. I'm almost as tall as Stan Hansen. I'm taller than Stan Hansen. I'm at the same height as Bruiser Brody. And they're wearing boots, and I'm 6'2.5", maybe 6'3" with my shoes on. So, that was kind of interesting too, because we'd always stand up because we wanted to get the height, to see what the height really was. And I was a pretty good, regular, because I knew, I was a tall guy. So, but man, that's all I had to see. Those guys were absolutely incredible. I mean, scary, brutal, and they would just, and they believed in keeping their heat. And if you weren't going to bring it, they were just going to eat you up. And that's exactly what happened. They beat Tim Horner. I mean, you sit there and say, come on, John, it's a show, but it's just the way it was portrayed. It was like an assassination. It was just, he just killed them. So those are my top 5 tag teams of all time for all you boys and girls in TV land.
Before we wrap things up, though, John, I do want to ask you real quick your thoughts on 3 other teams that you would have seen: Steamboat and Youngblood, the Road Warriors, and the Steiner Brothers.
I was a big mark for the Road Warriors. I thought, one of the all-time greatest acts, but I think they were pretty limited overall as far as in the ring and what they could do. They always needed guys that could sell for them to really put them over. But we saw them in a match when they first came to Mid-Atlantic. It was Wahoo McDaniel and I think Greg Valentine versus the Road Warriors in Winston-Salem. This is the old Winston-Salem Coliseum. We were sitting on wooden bleachers, and they just beat the shit out of Wahoo McDaniel. I don't know what was going on with that, but no, great act. And part of their act is Paul Ellering was just a fabulous, fabulous manager and a great mouth and smart, overlooked nowadays because he wasn't with them forever, as far as, a mouthpiece, but he was terrific. Steamboat Youngblood, if you notice that all my tag teams are always heels, because I cheer for the heels. I don't cheer for the good guys. Anyway, but Steamboat Youngblood were magic too. I mean, they could fly, they could do anything. Real smart, really athletic, and every girl in the arena wanted to sleep with Ricky Steamboat. There's no doubt about it. He was one of the best looking guys in wrestling, but he was an athlete. But I was not a Steamboat fan because I had a friend of mine, it was my running buddy, Ken Crutchfield, who was a 6th-degree black belt in karate and had a black belt in kung fu. And every time Steamboat would throw a chop, he would go, "That's so fake. He didn't hit him. God damn it." And it kind of ruined Steamboat for him because every time Steamboat did something, he would jump up and get pissed off and start screaming that it wasn't real. And thank God he didn't chop me because he could have killed me. I was playing basketball with Crutch once, and I told him that karate shit was fake. And I went up for a jump shot. We're playing basketball, and he jumped up, and he kicked the ball out of my hands, and I was about 9 feet up. And I said, "Okay, you win. It's the greatest thing ever." I don't know what I'm talking about. So, but Steamboat Youngblood, that was really, really hot stuff, and I can't even imagine. I was kind of in and out of wrestling. I watched it, but I didn't go to all the matches. And the Briscoes and Steamboat Youngblood and Slaughter and Knodel. I mean, that was really magic feud. That the power of that stuff, basically kind of propelled the Starrcade age. Yeah. And what was the other one you said?
The Steiner Brothers.
Steiner Brothers. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but I always felt the Steiner Brothers were more interested in themselves than their opponents sometimes. And I saw them hurt a lot of people. I saw the Road Warriors hurt a lot of people. But, athletically, they were terrific. I liked Rick Steiner better with the Varsity Club than I did with his brother. I thought he was funnier then and had a really interesting character. But Steiners were a big, big deal. But the thing that was weird about the Steiners, at least in Greensboro, is they never came to Greensboro. We got Flair, and the Steiners would be on like the B team, and they would be the main events of the other towns. So we didn't get to actually see those guys in person very often. But terrific athletes, goes without saying. The a lot of the Steiner moves are incredible. But to me, compared to the Midnight Express or Tully and Arn, they were just a notch below. But the Road Warriors there's nobody else a bigger deal. I mean, they came up out of Georgia and they went to the AWA up there in Minnesota with Gagne. And then they were in Memphis and they were a big deal there. And then when they came to Mid-Atlantic, the place was hot. And the first match in Greensboro, they had belt versus belt. They had the AWA tag belt versus the NWA tag belt, and it was Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez. And the Road Warriors ate them up. I mean, I swear to God, I couldn't believe it because, you're in the stronghold of the Crockett's and the NWA. And Animal grabbed Manny Fernandez and did a triple backbreaker on him and pressed him over his head every single time. And I'd never seen that before. It was one of those things like, holy shit. And Tommy Young did the DQ on it, just DQ'd him because they were killing him. And I don't think Dusty, wanted to get in there because those guys were big and strong and kind of had a green edge to them and they could hurt you. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the Road Warriors. I really am. I mean, I once got a New York Times and tried to give it to Paul Ellering, and he told me he already had one to leave him alone. Okay, fine. Anyway, yeah, so those are just my five. I mean, there are people that could argue them, night and day. The Freebirds deserve to be mentioned. I mean, those guys, Gordy and Roberts and Hayes, those guys were just terrific. And, and I was always a big Rip Hawk Sweet Hansen fan for different reasons because they were the first heels I ever watched that were funny. I mean, they were really funny. They would cut on Weaver and Becker and those guys and make fun of them, and they were funny. You kind of go, man, that was really great. So anyway, those are my tag teams. You guys can battle it out over something else. You can say, what Hitchcock said? He's an idiot. So, okay. All my friends here will agree, so that's fine.
There it is, John Hitchcock and the return of Front Row Section D. He will be back again very, very soon here on the show. And with that, we're going to move on to Book of the Week.
Book of the Week!
Book of the Week. Hey, Baldrin, what are you doing here?
Who fucking knows? I just show up every once in a while.
That really is true. That is your thing. You kind of show up, you make a big splash, and then you disappear. People go, whatever happened to Baldrin? And then you make a big splash again.
I'm like the Reverend Cleophas James. I appear like a thief in the night. Praise God. Can I get an amen?
You see, you'd be good. You'd be pretty good.
I could convert people.
Convert them from what to what? That's the question.
To becoming believers of breaking kayfabe with Baldrin and Bo.
You see that?
Available on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. No my.
Well, that must be what you're doing here. You're walking the halls of the Arcadian Vanguard Tower here.
The palatial Arcadian Studios, all in marble and beautiful gold. Truly, Brian, you spared no expense in the expenditures for the Arcadian Studios.
I like the marble. The gold I could do without. But listen, it's Book of the Week, and now we have a little bit of a dilemma. I have a Book of the Week, but I also want to mention John Hitchcock, of course, has a collection of some of his stories called Front Row Section D. You can get that. Also, of course, Jeff Baldrin has a book, Breaking Kayfabe, which, there's a little podcast that was named after that.
Really?
That book is out there. And the Book of the Week this week is Classic Arena Programs number 2, Slamogram Volume 2 by Scott Teal. It is a collection of the programs that came out of Nashville, Tennessee, and actually went to everywhere. They went to Chattanooga. They went all over the place. And these are from 1977. So this is really interesting stuff. And there's obviously a connection to you, Jeff, because your book, Breaking Kayfabe, and your future book are on Crowbar Press, which is what this book, our Book of the Week, is on. Crowbar Press.
Scott Teal, just an outstanding gentleman. So I can recommend any of his work is always top notch. He does some stellar research, and any book you pick up from Crowbar Press is pretty much a guaranteed knockout.
And this is pretty cool too, because this is actually his early work, because these are the programs he did in 1977. It's a collection now of his earlier stuff. Usually he's collecting other people's stories, other people's photos, even though he has his own photos, obviously. But this is a collection of his own work. So
this is from the Private Teal collection.
That's right. You said that with such enthusiasm. What else?
Well,
what else is in this private collection?
It's almost like I'm a professional broadcaster, for God's sakes.
You're getting very close to it. You're getting very close to it.
Yeah, well.
But, no ego. That's the thing that separates you from.
That's the important thing is I have little or no ego, please.
That's right.
Please.
That's right.
Turn the volume up during my segment only, Brian.
Oh, well, we'll see about that. But as we're going with Book of the Week, where were we? Oh, Book of the Week.
Book of the Week.
Let me pick it back up here. Book of the Week, classic
What,
arena
did you drop
programs.
it? What kind of producer are
I
you?
put it
Pick
down. It's a heavy book. It's a big, thick book. When you buy this book from Scott Teal,
It is
you're getting
full
your
of
money.
knowledge.
And George Goulas.
That's true.
Yes. I'm looking at the cover is cool because the cover of it actually has like a bunch of mini photos of every, or at least a lot of the covers of the programs. Spotlight on Ray Candy, Ricky Fields, a profile, the man they call the Giant, Ken Lucas, sleeper expert. Russia enters the race for the crown. Like these
Some would say George Goulas was a sleeper expert because he put people to sleep. But that's another story.
Spotlight on George Goulas, and of course, Goulas chases Royal. I guess he was going after Nelson Royal for a little while. But this is really cool. And again, check it out. And if you're interested in the history of Nashville wrestling, the history of wrestling in the Nicholas territory that wasn't Memphis. Memphis was just a part of the territory. This was the other part of the territory. Check this out now. You can get this book at crowbarpress.com. You can get Jeff's book there as well. But for everything else you need, including John Hitchcock's book, but anything else, you can go to tinyurl.com/superpod Amazon. By using that link, you spend no more money than you would normally spend by going to amazon.com. You do nothing different other than putting in this stupid little link that I gave you into your search bar, and you press enter, and then you go there, and anything you add to your cart, we get a little bit of credit and love from the people at Amazon. It's a nice way to support the show without really having to do anything special, and we don't have to put commercials or anything in this part of the show. It's wonderful. It's terrific. Once again, tinyurl.com/superpod Amazon. Give it to your girlfriend, your mistress, whoever it may be. I'm not talking to you, Jeff.
What about the side piece? Can you give it to the side piece?
Well, I think that covers it, doesn't it? Girlfriend and mistress.
I think you got wife, girlfriend, mistress, and side piece.
What's the difference between mistress and side piece?
Well, the mistress you might have to take out occasionally. The side piece is just a touch and go, hit and miss, that kind of thing.
No, hold on. Let's
okay, Mr. Specificity.
I want to evaluate this a little bit.
Let's talk about TinyURL, for God's sake.
TinyURL.com.
If you use the TinyURL, you know what happens? When it goes to Crowbar Press, Scott Teal looks at it and goes, holy shit, these people that listen to podcasts, they spend money.
And then your wife's going to go, is this your side piece? Who's Crowbar Press? I see you on your credit card bill.
And then you'll go, no, honey, it's not the side. It's the mistress. It's not the side piece.
Well, anyway, once again, tinyurl.com/superpod, Amazon. Lots of other shows have links they want you to use. Lots of other shows say, oh, please help us, help us, help us. But are they any good? Or do they suck?
They suck.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Jeff, you may have to do this every week. This is
fuck those guys.
No, not yet. Stop it. Okay. Stop it.
I'm sorry. I jumped in early.
You did. But when it comes down to it, you have to say, who do I want to support? The shows that suck or the shows that deliver quality? Except for this segment. And I think when you think about it, the answer will be clear. When it comes down to it, when it comes down to them or us, fuck those guys.
With a white hot poker, baby.
Support the Super Podcast. Support the Super Podcast with a white hot poker.
Right up the ass, baby.
Well, actually, as we go to the next segment, Jeff, just one other quick note. This next segment, In the News with Jim Cornette.
In the News
is sponsored by our friends, the wrestling fans over at Ramsor Records, and of course the website, ramsorrecords.kungfustore.com. But I want to make mention of something, and Dolph Ramsor said he wanted this to be the thing we talk about this week, and this is a great thing that they're doing here. The Avett Brothers will headline the Concert for Hurricane Florence Relief at, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, and Jeff, maybe you know the name, the Minges Coliseum on Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. Do you know, is that the correct name? Do you have any idea of the Coliseum here?
I have no fucking idea. The Minges Coliseum, where is it located at?
The Minges Coliseum, I believe it's in Greenville.
Yeah, because I'm so closely affiliated with Greenville. I mean, come on, really.
Well, anyway.
I will say, however, it's an extremely nice thing for them to do because I can tell all of you that the people in Panhandle were absolutely ravaged by Hurricane Michael. My brother actually lives in Destin and owns a home there. I have cousins and I have nephews and nieces that live there. So I am extremely grateful for the Avid brothers for doing this. It's a very nice gesture on their part.
Well, let's get back to Hurricane Florence, which some people have forgotten about already. But Hurricane Florence relief, the Minges Coliseum, Tuesday, November 13th, 2000.
What the fuck did I say, Michael?
I don't. Well, you were talking about.
I thought you were talking about Hurricane Michael.
Well, anyway, this is a serious deal. This is a serious deal here.
Yes, it is.
Speaking of serious, it's also serious that Future Islands and Valiant Thor, both illustrious bands with connections to Eastern North Carolina, will perform at this benefit show. The tickets, $75 for the lower level, $65 for the upper level, have gone on sale as of Friday, October 12th. You can get them right now at ecutickets.net or by phone, 1-800-DIAL-ECU. Proceeds from the concert will entirely be donated back to the resilient people and organizations contributing to Hurricane Florence relief. Once again, the Avett Brothers will headline the concert for Hurricane Florence relief at the Minges Coliseum on Tuesday, November 13th, 2018 in Greenville, North Carolina. And Future Islands and Valiant Thor. For fans of those two bands that are out there, you could check them out. Like you, Jeff, right?
Absolutely.
That sounded sincere, but anyway.
I got them on my iPod that apparently nobody has anymore.
This is the worst plug we've ever done for anyone.
Are you blaming me?
On behalf of Jeff Baldrin, I apologize. As the producer of Jeff Baldrin, I apologize to Dolph Ramsor, the Avett Brothers, as well as the people of North Carolina. But once again, the Avett Brothers, the concert for Hurricane Florence relief. For tickets, ecutickets.net or by phone at 1-800-DIAL-ECU. The show on November 13th is certainly going to be memorable and is certainly for a really good cause. So check that out and support this right now. But with that, let's go to one of the most popular segments in show history, In the News.
In the News.
With Jim Cornette. It is now time for one of the most popular segments we do here on the 605 Super Podcast, In the News. And that, of course, means we have to welcome the host of In the News, the Keith Olbermann of the Super Podcast, Mr. Jim Cornette.
The most trusted man in America.
Who is the most trusted man in America?
Do we have one? Probably me. I'm the only one who tells the truth.
Well, we'll find out here if you're going to tell the truth. We're going to find out if these articles told the truth. Of course, what we're going to do is look over classic wrestling newspaper articles. Many of these articles are from the research of Scott Teal at the Crowbar Press Archive. Check out his work on Facebook and, of course, crowbarpress.com. Some of this is stuff I've also researched, but let's get right to it, Jim. This first article is from Dayton, Ohio, the Dayton Daily News, September 22nd, 1989.
The headline, Macho Booted, Red Stomped. Wrestler's appearance causes flap. Cincinnati. So at the end of this bizarre baseball season for the Cincinnati Reds, it is sunk to this, a controversy involving professional wrestling. How apropos. Broadcaster Marty Brenneman called a Thursday afternoon appearance in his booth by the World Wrestling Federation's Randy Macho Man Savage, quote, the most excitement we've had in this stadium in 2.5 months, unquote. Undoubtedly, he was correct. Majority owner Marge Schott, who ordered Savage body slammed out of the booth, disagreed with Brenneman. She shouldn't have. What her Cincinnati Reds are doing isn't close to the entertainment provided by the WWF. Savage, formerly a catcher in the Reds minor league system at Class A Tampa, was in Brenneman's booth during the third inning, resplendent. In purple and gold tights, Brenneman put him on the air, touching off repercussions from Schott. First, though, Savage stopped the show. The Reds saluted him from their dugout, and Eric Davis flexed his muscles. All 4 umpires gathered near the pitcher's mound to look into the booth. Fans turned and waved. Schott, though, sent a message through her nephew, Executive Vice President Steve Schott, who relayed the message through radio producer Doug Kidd. Schott says if you ever want to go on the air for the Reds again, get him, Savage, off the air, Kidd told Brenneman. An angry Brenneman cornered Steve Schott off the air and said, don't you ever try to intimidate me again, and if you have something to say to me, say it yourself. Davis, who hit a 3-run homer, is 33rd in the first inning as the Reds cut a 6-0 deficit to 6-5, was stunned at Schott's reaction. Macho Man is a celebrity. If a celebrity can't go in the booth, who can? If it had been somebody from Pet Control, Schott wouldn't have minded. They should have paid him to come to this game. She says she wants to entertain the fans, and then she deprives them of this. That's the most excitement we've given the fans in 2 months. Other than Savage's appearance, the most remarkable occurrence was that neither starting pitcher retired a batter.
Well, there you go. The Macho Man returning to his Cincinnati Reds stomping grounds. Well, that never was. He never got out of the minors, but causing a big stir there for the Cincinnati Reds and notorious owner Marge Schott. But it's a good example of, based on the quotes from Eric Davis and the reaction he got from the umpires and everyone else, just how big wrestlers were as celebrities to other athletes and other people in the entertainment world.
Oh, and what year was that? Was that I've just lost it.
What year was 1989.
1989, and it was that period of time where Cincinnati was a hot wrestling town. It was 86 where the NWA show and WWF shows head up drew 17, 18,000 people in one night to live events across town. Cincinnati was doing well for both companies, so it was a market that was wrestling crazy, and apparently Schott was just crazy.
Oh, she was crazy. Did you hear about Marge Schott often?
I had a passing acquaintance with Marge. I think every once in a while she'd get in the news for fucking doing something stupid or saying something stupid, right? Or being racist. Was that one of them?
All of the above. That may be her right now. That may be one of her. She had a lot of controversies during her time, Jim. Racism, xenophobia. She had a dog that she used to let shit all over the field and thought was like blessing the players. She would make the players touch the dog's hair. Like there was all sorts of
I thought
stuff.
you were going to say she'd make the players touch the dog's shit.
Well, no, not that I'm aware of, but you never know. But lots and lots of racism and anti-Semitism and everything. I mean, it's almost so ridiculous it becomes funny. Plus, she's dead, so who cares? But, that's Marge Schott. But we're going to now talk about someone else who's a little wacky. The younger brother, or the older brother, well, we'll find out here in this article. The brother, apparently, of another famous wrestler.
Hogan isn't about to wrestle with his younger brother's fame. Brooksville, Florida. Randy Hogan was one of professional wrestling's punching bags. It wasn't so bad. It got him into the business, let him see the country, put him on national television more than a few times. It gave him 13 shots at various world championships. I was 0 for 13, Randy Hogan said, completely comfortable with that. He is 42 now and almost out of professional wrestling, but Hogan harbors no grief for a business that chose to make him a bit player while making his brother one of the most famous men in the world. You know the brother, Hulk Hogan. Everyone knows my brother, said Randy Hogan, who will wrestle on a 6-bout card tonight at 8 at the Hernando High Gymnasium. Everyone doesn't know me, but that's okay. That wasn't my role. I never thought I'd get as far as I did. Perspective is required. Professional wrestling took him in, gave him more than one man's share of fame. Not a megastar, Randy Hogan is a success, owner of Hogan's Seafood Distribution in Lakeland. But Hulk Hogan's brother? People don't understand. They assume Randy Hogan did what he did in wrestling by hanging onto the Hulkster's shoelaces, or worse. Hulk made it. What's your problem? Hulk was in the... Oh, my God. Hulk was in the right place at the right time, said Hogan, who attended Tampa's Robinson High. Wrestling needed a hero, and he was 6'7", 290 pounds, blonde hair, tan. He had it all. Randy is 3 years older with similar facial features and the same mustache, but genetics played a role in their destinies. Unlike his gargantuan brother, Randy Hogan is 6 foot 220. In America, heroes are not 6 foot 220. I wasn't going to be a big star, and I knew it, he said, and the more famous my brother got, the happier I was for him. Let the record show, Randy Hogan said he dipped his toes into professional wrestling 3 years before his brother. Does anyone know that? Does anyone care? They see the Hulkster on pay-per-view and see Randy selling fish in Lakeland. and they draw their own conclusions. In the mid-1970s, Randy was a drummer for the Holiday Inn House Band in Columbus, Georgia, hanging with the wrestlers who came to town every Wednesday. He began training at a Columbus gym and eventually wrestled on Ted Turner's Atlanta Superstation, which he said led to bouts around the country and 13 unsuccessful title matches. Randy Hogan was a good guy, but he had neither the size nor the look promoters sought. His brother did. Hulk was playing for a band in a Tampa bar in the late 1970s. How coincidental.
They're both musicians.
when playing in the Holiday Inn bar. When Jack and Jerry Briscoe entered the joint, they spotted this blonde giant on the base. In no time, Hulk Hogan was on television, movies, commercials. Meanwhile, Randy Hogan's run at full-time wrestling and his shoulder was snapped by Rick Steiner's belly-to-back suplex in Savannah, Georgia. He retired to Lakeland in 1989, bought and sold a few restaurants, and now owns a business and wrestles at fundraisers. He spent Thanksgiving raising spirits at a St. Petersburg hospital. I consider myself a very lucky man, he said. I have absolutely no bitterness or jealousy. I made a lot of friends and made some money, too. I have nothing to complain about. I believe he's registered that point. Maybe there is one thing. The Hogans never wrestled together. Randy was in the WCW, and Hulk was the star in the WWF when the organizations were competing for the country's attention. Sometimes Randy paid for being the Hulkster's brother when Midnight Express manager Jimmy Cornette would throw out a snide remark on national television, something like, I bet he wishes his brother were here to help him now. Hulk never helped. Maybe Randy never asked. Perhaps Hulk couldn't offer, what with the WCW-WWF feud. Or it could simply be the brothers are, as Randy said, not very close. Hulk Hogan declined an interview request for this summer. Well, there you go.
I like how he used you as evidence to show that it is his brother.
As evidence that we were perpetrating a rib on Hulk Hogan by having this fucking piss-looking job guy. Oh, my God. And, you know, he was a nice guy. But I guess for people now who've never heard of this guy and who wondered why we're fucking snickered over Hulk's long-lost brother, he was Hulk Hogan's brother like I'm Hulk Hogan's mother. No, this was a guy who was about that age, who was just a job guy that came to Atlanta TV, one of the many, you know, that would come to Atlanta TV, but he had shaved his hair and mustache, etc., in the Hogan gimmick, and he looked so pitiful looking that they used him as Randy Hogan to rib Hulk Hogan. And, you know, and he did get on national TV, Randy Hogan did, but he didn't wrestle for the fucking 13 world titles. And my good Lord. But is the heat on the guy who's doing the deceiving, the deceptiveness? Or is it the heat on the Tampa Tribune is the newspaper that printed this. Tampa. Hulk Hogan fucking is from Tampa and has lived in Tampa pretty much his whole life, right? And the Tampa Tribune could not have Greg Doyle of their staff writers fact check this any better than that.
That is amazing. I should have said before, this article's from Tampa, April 30th, 1994. And that is ridiculous. Why wouldn't they check that? You know, recently we had an article on the Superpodcast about Pat Tanaka, where he was interviewed extensively about the millions of dollars he made in the wrestling business before the age of 20. And there are so many things in this article that could easily be researched, but they weren't. The question was, who's the heat on? Very similar to what you said. Is it on Tanaka for saying these outlandish things? Or is it on the reporter for just saying, okay, whatever he said, I'll run with?
And you know, and it's and now once again, that was 24 years ago. It's more easily disprovable now. Anything because of Google and etc. Everybody knows Vince Russo didn't fucking do this and that and the other thing. He's full of shit because you can check it and there are contemporaneous reports. Back then, it was a little tougher, but still something of that magnitude and megatude of Hulk Hogan in his hometown suddenly has a brother that nobody ever knew about. Anyway,
we're going to move on from lunatics to the story of something that's very popular whenever we talk about it here on the show. A fight, a riot, something that happens with a wrestler and fans. So let's now go to, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jim, Pampa, Texas. Pampa, Texas, September 24th, 1957.
The hometown of Ron Bass, Pampa, Texas, the outlaw Ron Bass. Wrestler is filed on for assault here. More action took place outside the ring than inside last night during the regular Monday night wrestling bouts at the Pampa Sportsman's Club. As a result, Art Nelson, Amarillo wrestler, was filed on in Justice of the Peace Court this morning for assault and battery on a 16-year-old Pampa youth and for disturbing the peace by, quote, rudely displaying a weapon, unquote. Gerald McCoy, 1225 South Sumner, charged that the wrestler had hit and kicked him and later displayed a gun after a dispute following the matches. According to officers, during the evening's matches, a fracas broke out between Nelson, another wrestler, and two midget wrestlers. Several youths, the officers said, came to the aid of the midgets. And in the ensuing brawl, Nelson allegedly hit and kicked McCoy. After the brawl had broken up, Nelson went to his car to leave, but McCoy's automobile was blocking his path. Well, wouldn't you know who won the pony? When the boy refused to move, Nelson allegedly displayed a gun. The charge was filed in Justice of the Peace J.W. Graham's court this morning, and a warrant was sworn for Nelson's arrest. Officers said McCoy didn't know what caliber the pistol was, but that, quote, it sure looked big, unquote.
How about that story? I don't know what was going on with the midgets and the big brawl.
I guarantee you it was a mixed tag match with like a midget and a wrestler and a midget and another wrestler, and Art Nelson was a famous heel, and some way or another, the several youths that came to the aid of the midgets, probably with this fucking teenager, whacked one of the midgets while he was down on the floor. Art Nelson comes out, and so does these other kids, and everybody gets in a big hayrube.
In terms of the gun, if you had to guess during this period of time, and we're talking 1957, Texas, what percentage of the wrestlers traveled with guns?
90? I mean, well, and of course now, a lot. I won't say it's that high because a lot of wrestlers traveled in other guys' cars. Like one guy would haul 2 or 3 guys in his car, so maybe there was probably a gun in the car, especially if you were a heel.
And in this case, a big gun.
In this case, a big gun. Well, for a little 16-year-old.
Well, for this next one, we're going to return to something previously talked about a while back on Austin Idol Live. It was a story that I'd never heard before. Most people I knew had never heard before. And Austin Idol talked about Billy Spears putting a hit out on him. And a lot of people said that couldn't have happened. I never heard about this. Well, let's go to this article, Jim, from Panama City, July 27th, 1979.
Wrestler charged in case. Billy Spears, a well-known professional wrestler, was arrested Thursday afternoon for allegedly hiring an undercover deputy sheriff to have a fellow wrestler maimed. Sheriff Tullis Easterling said Spears, whose real name is William Fletcher Spearman, 37, of 201 Pensacola Beach Road, Gulf Breeze, paid the deputy $150 in cash and told him that he and unnamed associates wanted wrestler Austin Idol beaten severely enough to be unable to work. Spears, Easterling said, agreed to pay the undercover deputy $200 more after the attack on Idol. According to the sheriff, Spears specifically mentioned breaking one of Idol's arms or legs and damaging his face. Both Spears and Idol were scheduled to wrestle in Panama City Thursday night, not necessarily against each other. Spears, who will appear in county court today, was being held at the county jail late Thursday and missed the match. Easterling said Spears is charged under a Florida law making it illegal for a person to solicit or conspire with someone to commit an offense. Spears is charged with conspiring to commit aggravated assault and could face up to 5 years in state prison. The wrestler was arrested at 6 p.m. in the Panama City Mall parking lot moments after allegedly giving the cash to the deputy.
Now, you had never heard about this before Austin Idol started talking about it a couple of years ago, right?
I had not. But what was the beef? They were both obvious Panama City, so that means they were wrestling in the Pensacola territory.
That's Ron Fuller.
Which was Ron Fuller's at the time before Continental. It was still Southeastern down there too, right?
Yeah.
So what was the beef?
No one knows for sure. It could have been jealousy.
Idol doesn't know.
Idol says he's not exactly sure why it happened.
I don't know if Austin Idol, darling, would be ambivalent in any way about why a man tried to pay another man to have him maimed, darling.
He did say, though, that when the police brought him down to tell him about what was going on, and he was with his wife driving to the show when they pulled him over and told him, and he went down there and they let him go in and see Billy Spears sitting behind bars. And he cut a promo on him I better never see you again or anything else. And but a lot of people doubted the story because no one had ever heard it before. And here's the article.
Well, there you have it. And now, did I assume Billy Spears left the territory?
I assume. I now have to look in to see if he actually served any time.
We need to research this further because the mad magician, Billy I wonder if he could come up with a key to a set of handcuffs or a jail cell door as quickly as he could come up with a foreign object in his wrestling days.
37. He was only 37 in 79?
That probably would be around correct because I remember he was a name used in some of the Southern territories from probably the late 60s, early 70s through the end of the 70s, and I don't remember him working too much in the 80s, to be honest.
Do you remember any other cases of locker room heat going too far and leaving the arena?
Well, there has been, and often, actually this was in the arena. It's in Gary Hart's book when fucking Missing Link sucker punched him and he sliced Link with his razor blade. Fargo and Mario Galento in Memphis, when Mario Galento did jump Jerry Jarrett on the live studio show, and then also had jumped in the ring with a straight razor on Lawler in Jonesboro. Fargo called him and threatened to kill him if he messed with his boy Lawler anymore. I think Sputnik and Jackie had a situation that made the papers where one was threatening to kill the other in the early to mid 60s in Memphis.
Yeah, what was that about? Actually, let me stop you right there because I remember when Memphis Heat came out, that was one of the interesting things. I had never heard about them having issues. I mean, I didn't know too much about everything they had done at that point, but what was the Heat? Because even when they made Memphis Heat, those two guys are cutting promos on each other.
Yeah, there was heat, but they were in the newspapers because they had called and threatened to kill each other, and this was going to happen, and blah blah blah. And it could be just as simple as it was the two top guys over a 20-year period, and they didn't like each other because they were both the best. Who knows?
Who knows? Well, let's now go to your stomping grounds, Louisville, Kentucky, Thursday, September 22nd, 1927.
A little before my time, but fighter works too hard in off hours. Louisville, September 21st, Associated Press. Jack Reynolds, claimant of the World's Lightweight Wrestling Championship, was arrested today when he attempted to engage in an unadvertised bout with his wife on a downtown street. Police stopped the contest and arrested both participants on a charge of disorderly conduct. Reynolds made bond and started after his wife again, but was finally induced to return to his hotel.
First of all, that may not have been the best idea to right away do that, but do you know anything about Jack Reynolds?
Well, he was not a native Louisvillian, I don't believe. I believe that he was probably here for a wrestling event of some description.
And in 1927, who would have been promoting there?
That would have been pre Allen Athletic Club, as John Cosper has done that great research. The Allen Athletic Club under Haywood Allen was formed in 1933. I mean, from the 1890s, Louisville had wrestling of some description, and it was kind of hot in the Frank Gotch era, where you'd have more live wrestling and sometimes even names, and then it cooled off in the teens and then started back up again in the Strangler Lewis era, because as everybody knows that has read John's book, Bluegrass Brawlers, Strangler Lewis was given that name for the first time here in Louisville in 1916 or whatever, maybe 14. I can't remember. But there were wrestling events that would come and go, but there was nothing regular. There was not like until the 30s and the Allen Athletic Club, there wasn't regularly scheduled matches under one specific promoter, and guys wrestled on cards based on sometimes when they were traveling cross country on trains, they would try to get themselves booked in stopovers and shit like that. And that's why there was really no rhyme or reason as to what wrestler would appear in what town back in those early days.
To this article, was there ever a wrestler that was around that everyone was uncomfortable? He would have his wife or his girlfriend with him and they would always fight?
There's been a few of those too. There was one of those, which I will leave everybody nameless, at one of the Ring of Honor tapings we did one time in Philly. But well, but then you had the guys that brought their wives into the business, like Dandy Jack Donovan had old Vern Bottoms as his second, and a lot of the Indian wrestlers, their Princess Little Doves or whatever were actually their wife, or the Gorgeous George's valet was. So, things could get ugly on the road if there were not if the relationship was not rock solid and rooted in good, deep Christianity.
We obviously know why Vern Gagne decided to go with Vern instead of his given name, Laverne.
Laverne? Yes,
would have been Laverne Gagne. But was Vern Bottoms, was Vern her name, or was it Laverne and she shortened it?
I don't know. I always Vern Bottoms was her name. That her professional name, at least. I never met the lady.
Well, we're going to now go to an article, Jim, from Columbus, Ohio, September 14th, 1959. This is another one of those things I knew nothing about, but I'm fascinated by.
Tough guy worked over by wrestler in special match. Columbus, UPI. Buddy Rogers, a nationally known wrestler, showed Buddy Austin who the real Buddy Rogers is in a wrestling match Saturday night. Austin had caused Rogers a considerable amount of bad publicity last week by telling police who arrested him in a bar that he was Buddy Rogers. Rogers was wrestling in Montreal, Canada at the time Austin was arrested. Upon his return to Columbus, he immediately canceled a match set for Saturday night and challenged Austin to a match. Rogers said before the match that he intended to even things when he got into the ring with Austin. He said he was a family man with a clean reputation, and he did not appreciate headlines around the country that he had been involved in a brawl. Rogers mauled Austin into submission in 1 minute and 3 seconds, with Austin never landing a punch. A fire department emergency vehicle hauled Austin to a hospital where a 2-inch cut over his eye was treated. Austin, who fights under the name of Buddy the Killer Austin, will appear in municipal court here Friday with his 2 companions on charges of assault and battery and malicious destruction of property. They were arrested last Wednesday night after a fracas in which they slugged a local newspaper photographer.
Boy, there's so much going on here. Do you know about any of this?
I've never heard this story, no.
What was the relationship between Buddy Austin and Buddy Rogers?
Well, obviously, besides the fact that I always thought that Buddy Austin may have been one of Buddy Rogers' guys.
That's what I thought, too. That's why I asked.
Well, here's what I can piece together. They're in Columbus, Ohio, which was not only Al Half's hometown, home base for all those years, the promoter, and he had a huge crew of guys that he booked to promoters all over the place in the Midwest. But also Buddy Rogers was his top guy, Al Half's top guy at one point and at numerous points, and lived in Columbus, Ohio sometimes because one of the deals was Columbus was centrally located to the Northeast, the Midwest, down south. You were within a day's drive of, like, in those days, 70% of the fucking nation's population, right? So it was a great place to have a booking office. And Rogers, if he, when he was exclusively working the Northeast for McMahon or whatever, he might live in Camden or in New Jersey where his hometown was, but a lot of times he lived in Ohio. And this was during the period of time, 2 years before he won the NWA title, he's in Columbus. And because it says when he returned to Columbus, upon his return to Columbus from Montreal. So I think what happens is Buddy Austin got in a fight in a bar and probably decided, oh, fuck, I'll tell him it's fucking Buddy Rogers because he was drunk and he was going to rib fucking Buddy or just whatever the fuck. Maybe it wasn't a rib. Maybe it was like, maybe I can get by with this. And Buddy Rogers, who was noted for not being a fucking badass tough guy, gets back to the territory where he lives and is probably the booker at that point, or certainly has power to book himself in anything he wants to do, and says, this has made the news. We got to change this fucking match. So the newspaper backed up that the match was changed and challenged Buddy Austin and then beat the piss out of him. And beat him in a minute because fuck you, motherfucker. You're out in a fucking bar getting arrested in a fight and using my name, so I'm going to fucking beat you in a minute to give you a receipt. That's what I read into that. And they've turned it into business.
And you said that Buddy wasn't known for being a tough guy. Of course, there are various stories from him having a confrontation with Big Bill Miller and Carl Gotch, him and Lou Thez.
In Ohio, near Columbus. I've been in that building where they slammed the door on his hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, and obviously, once again, whether Killer Buddy Austin was a tough guy or not, the booker and the boss of the territory just said, he's going to beat you in a minute, and you're going to get some fucking color. So he's going to beat you in a minute, and you're going to get some fucking color, and you're going to go to the hospital in an ambulance, and possibly wearing a pink fucking tutu, because he's really pissed.
That was one of Thez's big complaints, wasn't it? That unlike Gorgeous George, Buddy couldn't wrestle. Buddy was a great performer.
Yeah.
But it was one of the things that to Thez mattered, that Buddy couldn't actually go in there and hurt somebody.
Yes.
Unless, I guess a lot of people...
Unless he could hurt people when they weren't waiting for him to hurt them,
right.
But not in his shoot.
Right.
He could dump you over the top rope in an awkward way, but...
Well, there are lots of ways to hurt someone, including having tax problems. And let's go to this next article now, Jim. This one's from Nashville, Tennessee, although it's not in Nashville, Tennessee. Tuesday, October 4th, 1955.
One wonderful segue, by the way, into the tax story. From 1955, promoter denies tax evasions. Knoxville sports promoter George Costanza. God damn it.
George Costanza.
I started to say George Costanza. Knoxville promoter George Costanza pleaded not guilty to charges of failure to file an income tax return and failure to pay federal admission taxes in federal court here yesterday. Costanza, wrestling promoter in Knoxville for many years, is charged with failure to file a return for 1951 and also with 9 counts of failure to pay federal taxes on admission charges to wrestling shows from January through October 1952. Judge William Miller granted a continuation of the case until next term at the request of Costanza's attorney, Hobart Atkins of Knoxville. Miller also continued the income tax evasion case against Chandler Beard, former Dresden car dealer. His attorneys asked a 90-day continuance, but Judge Miller set December 13th as tentative date for the trial.
How common were tax problems amongst wrestlers and wrestling promoters?
Amongst wrestlers, epidemic. Amongst promoters, problems were not that widespread as I have come to find out or ever heard, because most of them knew how to avoid those problems. But, and this is George Costanza, who was John Costanza's I wish Golden Boy Joe Costanza was here with me now, but George was either John's older brother or potentially his father. But the Costanzas had promoted wrestling in Knoxville and parts of East Tennessee since the 40s at least. And that's when John Costanza, as we've talked about on our other programs, finally sold to Ron Fuller in 1974, sold Knoxville. They had been a little island unto themselves, the lowest budget, little show, but drew huge crowds in Knoxville and the little surrounding towns under Ron Wright and Whitey Caldwell and the Wright brothers in general and top guys like that. So, but this is 1955 and they're talking about 51 and 52. So they probably caught him. They just caught him.
If you were a wrestler who intended to pay your taxes and do everything on the up and up, how difficult was it? If you're working a territory where you're working, let's say Mid-South, you're in 4 different states, 5 different states? Is it difficult to do your taxes when you're working in so many different states?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, if you're a professional wrestler and you're doing your own taxes, you ain't working that much, especially back in the territory days. It wasn't hard for wrestlers or guys to keep up with their taxes if they made the effort to, which was get a CPA that understands the wrestling business, what you do, and how you make your money and how you're paid and etc., and keep all of your records. One of the reasons I have all those records is because that was for taxes as well. All of your road expenses, everything you spend, everything you make, and where you make it from. And at one point at the height of working and of course, some of the tax laws were different then, and don't ask me to quote them chapter and verse, because that's why rule number 1, always have a CPA. But I think I filed at one time income tax in 10 or 12 different states working for Crockett in 86, 87-ish.
Such a pain in the ass.
But it was a pain in the ass because it cost money, and a lot of the state taxes weren't a lot of money, except if the state that you lived in charged an income tax. But also, you had to keep good records, and you had to pay quarterly estimates based on what you thought your income would be. It wasn't hard to do it if you decided you were going to do it and you understood it. For the guys who didn't get it or just wouldn't do it, then it was the hardest thing in the world, and that's why. A lot of times in OVW, especially, I would tell guys, and I would give them the number of the accounting firm that I was using, or I would remind them to, talk to somebody and explain to them, don't fucking owe the government or you owe them for the rest of your life. It's not hard to do. It's just hard to commit to do.
Well, with that, Jim, let's go to our final story. This is from Council Bluffs, Iowa, September 16th, 1946.
Wrestler tells of his wanderings. Take baby away from young parents. Dorsey Thomas. That's the subheadline, folks. Dorsey Thomas, 31, Cleveland, Oklahoma, was found wandering around Fort Crook Sunday night in wrestling trunks. He told military police he was attacked by an irate crowd Friday night at a Plattsmouth Carnival wrestling match and had been hiding out since that time. That would be 48 hours. Stating that local talent challengers get 15% of the receipts if they stay in the ring 5 minutes, Thomas said the crowd thought he was stopping a good show when he asked how much time during a challenge match when one of his men was wrestling. Thomas added that he could hear the mob beating the Missouri Valley bottomland during the night, and Saturday night said he swam the Platte River pursued by a group in a motorboat. Sheriff, just hell of a swimmer. Sheriff Joe Mrazek of Plattsmouth said the crowd was angered when Thomas hedged on paying a local boy for winning a challenge, but thought that the story of 2 days' pursuit was imagination. Thomas stayed overnight Sunday in the Omaha jail.
Well, what do you think? Is it imagination? Or did he have heat?
Well, it sounds like hey, you could get some heat in those at shows. I'm telling you, that was the deal. That's how working heel and promos and working the crowd and having business matches for betting and etc. started, was at the carnival athletic shows. And this guy apparently got plenty. He got heat when he didn't want to fucking pay the kid that beat him. That's when you'd have the biggest riot, when your fucking at-show champion would get his ass kicked and they wouldn't come up with the money. Or like when old William Harding had to protest to get his money when he got out of Bob Roop's sugar hole in Frankfurt those many years ago. That's when you got the real fucking problem. But I'm not understanding the sub-headline. Wait a minute. It's Omaha Roundup. Wrestler tells of his wanderings, take baby away from young parents. Perhaps the take baby away from young parents was in a second half of this particular article that we were not made privy to.
I assume.
Or maybe maybe the dingo ate your baby while he was swimming through the fucking Missouri Valley bottomland and being pursued by a group in a motorboat. I don't fucking know. It was Omaha back in 1946.
This is 1946. I'm always surprised. I guess I always think of the at shows as ending much earlier than that, but they go on much further than I expected. When did they actually end? When were the last carnival shows?
Well, I mean, Frankie Kane in the early 50s was doing carnivals, right? And Sputnik Monroe. I would think it lasted through the 50s, man, maybe even in some of these places, maybe in places like the Kansases and the Missouris and the Iowas maybe even later.
It is a part of wrestling history that I know a lot of people have done research on, and it's fascinating because, you know, while all this is happening in the big arenas at the carnivals, they're still doing this stuff. And of course, when it goes wrong, they chase you out of the building and you're having to swim away from motorboats, whatever else. This one's really good. This is almost as good as them chasing Ron Wright and burning his plane and all that other stuff.
Yes, and also even almost better than the Sheik hiding under a bus to get away from Lou Thez.
What?
What? You've heard that story?
I have not.
No, it was. It basically, according from Lou's side, they were supposed to wrestle in Chicago one night at the amphitheater, and when Sheik was first getting over with his gimmick, and Thez basically claims he said to him, "Well, I'm going to brook none of your nonsense tonight. We're going to wrestle." And so he claims that the Sheik just went mad and in the match and just went out into the crowd and then ran all the way out into the street and hid under a bus from the crowd trying to find him. And the Sheik's side, from what I heard, was that he just wanted some publicity since Thez wouldn't do his fucking gimmick. But regardless, it made the paper and people talked about it for ages after that the fucking Sheik and Thez ended up out in the street and Sheik was hiding under a bus in like freezing cold winter weather in Chicago in tights.
There's a great story I read a long time ago, and who knows how much of it's true. I want to believe all of it's true. It was from Montreal, and the story was about the fans chasing Wild Bull Curry out of the arena down a residential street, and he dove through the front window of a house where the family was in there. They're like an elderly couple. They didn't know who he was. They see this half-naked man with the giant eyebrows in the face. They scream. He locks himself in the bathroom because he won't come out because he's afraid of what's going to happen with the mob. The cops come. They get rid of the crowd. They make him get in the police car. They drive him back to the arena to get his clothes and everything else. They pass the angry mob when they're going back to the arena who attack the police car, kick out all the windows, turn it over. Just the wildest story I ever heard, but it is Wild Bull Curry, and things like that actually do sometimes happen.
The one I always wanted to be true, and this was, once again, this was not only told in wrestling magazines, but this was actually in a newspaper article that I've seen, but as we've just proven on this segment, things can be in the newspaper. Yeah. But the story of how Bruiser once in Cincinnati threw a chair into the ring at his opponent and was arrested for it because there was a woman. It was a wheelchair and there was a woman in it at the time. And I just always wanted that to be true because that would be Dick the Bruiser in a nutshell.
Well, we can't top that. So with that, another episode of In the News, in the books. Jim, I will let you sign off.
Well, in that case, in the meantime and in between time, until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow. May all your news be good news. And all those other, this is London and all those other sign-offs. Ladies and gentlemen, until then, next week I'm going to be on assignment. You know what that was? When Walter Cronkite, the last couple of years of his career, would say, and tomorrow night I'll be on assignment. His boat was named Assignment. So next time you do this show, I'll be on assignment. Ladies and gentlemen, until then, bye-bye, everybody.
And we had actually just stopped tape, and Jim was about to tell me a story, and I didn't know it, and he couldn't believe I didn't know it, so he said, start the tape up. And
with Killer Buddy Austin and Buddy Rogers and the whole legal kerfluffle. I didn't know you didn't know this story, that a lot of people know that the reason why Brian Lee got the job as the fake Undertaker was because he and the Harris boys, who he's half brothers with, Ron and Don Harris, and the Undertaker were all friends. And they all at one point lived in Nashville, and they had worked together and broke in together. And Brian was a good friend of Taker's. As a matter of fact, one time Undertaker came to Glasgow, Kentucky to a Smoky Mountain wrestling show and sat in the locker room all night just because he was off from the WWF and just rode to a town with Brian Lee, right? So I had the biggest star in wrestling in my fucking locker room in Glasgow, and I couldn't tell anybody. But then Brian had, I guess, what we might generously term as some type of domestic dispute there in Nashville while he was still looked like the Underfaker with the long hair and everything. He still had the look to him. And somehow he told the arresting officers that hauled him out of his home that he was indeed the Undertaker from the WWF, which led to the newspapers and the local radio stations and the TV stations announcing that the WWF's Undertaker had been arrested for some unsavory and unseemly fucking activity, which led to basically Undertaker and Brian Lee, at last I heard, I don't know, this has been 20 years ago, but they were not friends after that.
That's a hard one to recover from.
Those things get, but Nashville, look here, Nashville has been the scene of some classic wrestling arrests, and because now you had the Undertaker there.
Yeah.
You also had Randy Savage in the Waffle House, and you've heard about Roger Smith, right? Roger Mason, Roger Smith, Dirty Rhodes, one of the assassins.
How did he get arrested?
He got arrested. Well, he got arrested a couple of times. I think he was hauled in one time. He burned a cross on Nick Goulis's front lawn.
Great.
As a commentary, I believe it wasn't a racial thing because both of them were white, but it was a commentary somewhat on Nick's payoffs to him that he felt like a slave. Wow. But the good one was when, and I don't know anything about his domestic situation now. If they're still happily married, then bless them. And I've seen Roger over in West Virginia here recently, and he was a hell of a talent and a hell of a storyteller and a nice guy. But on this particular moment in the late 70s or some point, his domestic situation at his home turned into a hostage crisis involving the SWAT team and assurances amongst everybody that they weren't all going to be blown up with nuclear weapons before he was extracted from the home. And so it was with this kind of record that one day I am driving Roger Smith, who I'm managing as one of the assassins along with his partner, Donnie Bass. But Roger needed a ride from Nashville down to the spot show we were doing in West Tennessee, and I was driving him in my car, and I haven't been in the business but about a year or so, and I'm just so happy to be there. And, you know, I'm really, because the assassins, Roger and Donnie, had great matches every night, and I could learn shit on passing gimmicks and timing, and they would help me take bumps. They'd just kind of take you with them, and you wouldn't get hurt. But I'm driving Roger. I do know about some of his past background, and we're driving down this lonely Tennessee state highway about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the way to the town. There's not a car in sight in any direction, 2-lane highway, farms and fields off to the side, just all alone. And I'm just driving, and he's just sitting there, and just out of nowhere, he says, you know, Sometimes I feel like killing myself and taking all my friends with me. And I looked at him, I said, Roger, I don't know if it's the time to tell you this, but I never have thought too much of you. And he liked that. When he drove by himself, sometimes he'd get to the town before bell time because he'd stop at truck stops and just play video games and do things and just kill time and just lose track of it. But he was a hell of a worker when he showed up.
Was Ronnie Gossett arrested in Nashville when he sold the territory?
That would have been where because Ronnie was from more toward Chattanooga, but they would have filed a complaint on him in Nashville. So he sold Nick Goulas's territory at the time when he didn't actually work for Nick or own any part of that territory, but he had convinced some woman who was in the market apparently for a wrestling territory that he could sell her Goulas Welch Wrestling Enterprises, and the only way that the actual office in Nashville found out about it was the woman called the office and commanded a meeting of all the office employees on Monday morning. And they said, well, who are you? And she said, I'm the new owner. And when they investigated further, I've always heard Ronnie did go to jail for a period of time, but he never gave the money back, $40,000.
I would have been interested to see what she would have done as a booker.
What, and there is that, and there'd been precedent for it. Because Eddie Marlin went to Tupelo, Mississippi, just fucking sucked. And it was just the asshole of the Tennessee territory. And nobody wanted to work there on Friday nights every week in that shitty building. And Eddie was going to close it up. And this rich woman that used to sit on the front row with her family and friends named Miriam Springfield said, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, Miriam, I just ain't making any. Well, how much do you want for it? I'll buy it and run. And Miriam Springfield became the promoter in Tupelo. She paid Eddie Marlin in the office some unheard of, unlisted, redacted amount of money. And in return, they booked a measly 8 or 10 man card of the Heat crew in there on Friday nights. And she had to pay them $50 a piece plus a booking fee to the office. And that's how that worked. But
how long did that last?
A couple of years. I left when I left the territory, it was still going on. So,
Tim Tyler said something on the show I'd never heard before. You mentioned Randy Savage in the Waffle House. The other famous story was Randy Savage getting arrested for shoplifting meat at Kroger.
Yeah, I was here in Lexington.
Tim Tyler said that was done intentional, that Randy told him beforehand he was going to do that to get in the newspapers.
And I believe that I have reported it as factual that they caught him with a fucking T-bone down his pants. But I can believe that it was something done for publicity at that point because they were the outlaw bad boys of, wrestling at that time. He probably just did want to get in the paper. And it wasn't like it was going to help the image of Randy Savage as this psychopathic maniac. It wasn't like he was doing a Ric Flair gimmick where he, custom made from head to toe. But Ronnie Gossett, by the way, I will say he was a hell of a manager. It's my favorite line. Is that your face or did your ass open a branch office? He was just fucking hilarious. But every time I'd see him, I'd ask him, Ronnie, what have you got for me in a little cheap short trip territory? And I was
Boom! There it is, In the News with Jim Cornette, and a second bonus edition of In the News there at the very end. I want to thank Jim for being a part of the Super Podcast once again this week, and I want to thank everyone who was on this show. What a interesting and somewhat weird episode of the Super Podcast this is. I have been recording tons and tons of interviews the last several weeks for future episodes. I already announced it on the Jim Cornette Show. Next episode of the Super Podcast, we have ECW referee Jim Molyneux, one of the few people who could say they were there at ECW at the very beginning and the very end, as well as Jeff Otto with the amazing story of Lords of the Ring. If you're someone like me who's a real geek for the history of money and the history of merchandising in wrestling, you're going to love this segment. This segment is really, really fascinating. All of that and much more. I just did a bunch more stuff with Fumi Saito, so get ready. We have more of our history of Japanese wrestling segments coming up in the future. Check that out. I want to thank ECW Press and Tim Hornbaker for supplying us with copies of Death of the Territories to give away here this week on the show. What a fantastic book that I think every wrestling fan should own. Get your copy today by going to tinyurl.com/superpod, Amazon, and check that book out. Great, great book. And thank you once again to ECW Press. And we really appreciate all your support throughout the years. On the topic of support, I want to thank all of you for supporting the new Mid-South Wrestling television review with me and Mike Mills. It has done really, really well, and the reaction has been through the roof, and I want to thank everyone for that. You could check that out wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast, the Mid-South Wrestling television review. I would, of course, encourage you also to check out the other fine shows on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, including Breaking Kayfabe with Baldwin and Barry, Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam and Sean Goodwin, Kentucky Fried Wrestling with Scott Bowden. I can't even begin to tell you how much fun I have recording with Scott Bowden. Maybe more fun than with anyone else, seriously. And most of that's off air. But what a fun time I have with Scott Bowden. Of course, we also have Ron Fuller's Studcast. And I just want to say a few things here real quick. We've done some amazing episodes lately, and Ron, as we talked about earlier, has really jumped in deep and tried to find out as much information as he didn't know, confirm things he knew, find out things he knew weren't right, and it's really been remarkable. The Atlanta story is fascinating, and finally putting it down and putting it into a timeline really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I want to encourage everyone to check out Ron Fuller's Studcast at fullerpod.com. And we do also do a Patreon show that we always have a good time. We have good guests. We have good topics. You can check that out at patreon.com/Studcast. Check that out and check out and support all Arcadian Vanguard podcasts because they're all fantastic. As we wrap things up, a few notes here. Of course, if you want to get a Super Podcast t-shirt, a Mothership t-shirt, stickers, magnets, whatever it may be, the official online store for the Super Podcast, tinyurl.com/superpodstore. And of course, if you want to buy any of the books we talked about today or anything else that you need, you can go to Amazon. And the best way to get there is by using tinyurl.com/superpod. Amazon. You guys know how it works, and you really support the show by using that link. So once again, for all your purchases, give it to your girlfriend. tinyurl.com/superpod. Amazon. You know, usually we plug various ways you could support the show on PayPal or via Patreon. This time, instead of that, for those of you who do support the show via those means, how about support one of the various things we talked about earlier today, whether it's everything going on in the Panhandle, whether it's the Carolinas, whether it's Jerry Gray. And, you know, I know our friend William Harding, the Sugar Hole champion, is going through a rough time too. We'll talk about that on a future episode, but consider helping them this week instead of supporting the show when it comes to Patreon and PayPal. We also want to remind you the show is on Twitter at 605pod. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last, and you can follow the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network on Twitter at Superpodcasts. Of course, the Super Podcast is on Facebook, facebook.com/superpodcast. You get to see Travis Heckle's exclusive, brilliant artwork for each and every episode. You get to see this. I'll tell you, it's going to become a little bit of a feud. King Shivas has so many photos of himself and wrestlers, and I think Roy Lucier is starting to try to get into the competition because all of a sudden in the last week, Eddie Furlong, Bam Margera, he's sending in all these photos. We'll see what happens, but you can see all of those and much more. Facebook.com/superpodcast. I also want to make mention real quick before we wrap up. Don Leo Jonathan passed away, and I was really, really sorry to hear this. I know he was up there in years, and his health had slipped significantly after he had spoken to me in the conversation we aired here on the Super Podcast. Really, really nice guy, really giving with his time. I want to thank a friend of the show, Kevin Orcutt, who actually put me in touch with Don Leo months and months and months ago. And like I said, just what an honor, what a pleasure it was to get to actually speak to him and get to talk to him about things that I'm interested in, and I know so many of us are interested in terms of wrestling history, but a really, really cool guy. And I know I've said it before, I believe I have a few more things I've never aired. I'm going to see what I can do about finding them and getting him on the show pretty soon. But a very, very cool guy, and very, very sad to hear about Don Leo's passing. And like I said, we'll get more Don Leo audio on the show in the coming weeks. If you want to get in touch with the show by mail, you could do so by sending it to the 605 Super Podcast, P.O. Box 1242, Morristown, New Jersey, 07962. That's the 605 Super Podcast, the Mothership! P.O. Box 1242, Morristown, New Jersey, 07962. The 605 Super Podcast is sponsored by Ramsor Records. Go to ramsorrecords.kungfustore.com, enter the promo code 605 at checkout, and save 20%. Ramsor Records, the Mid-Atlantic Wrestling of the music industry. Of course, the 605 Super Podcast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. For the many guests on this week's episode, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!